turn this music off. Hey, let's go ahead and get this party started. Let's go ahead and get our live call-ins going. Let me go ahead and get this stuff shared and stuff real quick, and then we'll go ahead and start the news. If we have any call-ins, we will be pausing this show, and actually doing the call-ins. Like I said, please be respectful. If y'all call in, excuse me, if y'all call in and y'all do not get an answer, or if the line is busy, please do not hesitate to try back again or try back in a little bit. It's that not that I'm ignoring y'all or anything like that. It's that I'm on another phone call with somebody else. As of right now, we have no phone calls right yet, but I'm hoping that will change. We are about to start getting this stuff over on social media. Step. Like I said, we want to try to do our community right. We want to talk to our community. We want to be able to communicate with our community. We want to be able to actually interact with our community, if that makes sense. If that makes sense, y'all. Like I said, call in number 540-251-7687. We are live and we are ready to roll with live stream. Call in. So whenever y'all ready, which y'all say we are having a bit of camera difficulties over there. But anyways, the phone number is 540-251-7687. Please, please give us a call. Speak your mind. Give a shout out to your loved ones if they watch the show. Hopefully they do. We are trying to get our show more promotion and more of a crowd with this call-ins, y'all. Let's try to actually help out here and just share our platforms over on your social medias if y'all don't mind. And also, if y'all can actually let y'all's friends know about the call-ins now on the weekends, on Saturdays and Sundays nights, we are going to be having call-ins. So don't miss it, man. Um, I'm hoping to get a pretty decent crowd with this. Um, we are not looking for any of our community, like all my members already know. We are not looking for any of y'all. To drop money in on our in on the show. Less than y'all want to. I mean, don't get me wrong. Whatever money, if y'all do put money into the show, whatever money that y'all do put into the show will be going straight into the show. Um, we are not making a penny off of this. I'm actually about to start putting money into the show a little bit, just so we can actually start getting more promotion and more people coming and actually seeing about what's going on with the show and everything. Let's go ahead and move this one down to the bottom screen. We're going to move that one down to the bottom. That way we can actually get a little bit better view on the cameras down here. We're going to move this up a little bit. If we see anything that's going on with the cameras, we will be zooming into that exact camera at that time. As of right now, it is. It's nighttime. Actually, you know what? Let me pull something up for y'all. We are going to put the uh uh. I like it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put this up on the screen just so y'all can see it. There we go. We are going to put this right here like this. And we're going to put this here. I apologize, y'all. Be doing this in the middle of a show like this. Feel kind of bad doing that. Stop. All right. Okay. All right. That'll be good right there. All right. Yeah. That's what we do right there. All right. All right. So now that we got the time on there, let's bring this order this to the top. And we will be changing this. We will be changing this up, y'all. I apologize for doing that right on the straight show like that. But anyways, we have a few things to go over. And hopefully we get some call-ins here soon. Like I said, we are going to stick with this call-in thing. It seems like everybody I asked are like, yeah, it'd be cool, be able to call into your news channel and actually be able to communicate and actually speak your thoughts about what you think about what's going on in the world. But anyways, so while we're waiting on call-ins on 540-251-7687, we will be going on with the news for now on. So, further ado, let's get to the news. And yeah, 1 second, y'all. I hate it when it does that. I don't know why it does that.
And y'all might notice we're on early. That's because there's a major situation happening right this second inside of Russia. We are seeing a massive attack on Moscow, and not just the Moscow district. This is an attack on central Moscow, which is, of course, close to the Kremlin. And right now, we're seeing explosions in Moscow itself, and they are struggling to defend their capital city. So it's going down right now. We've also heard that the U.S. Navy is going to allegedly start escorting ships in the Strait of Hormuz in probably the next few hours. So that's also massive. And also, Iran's begun launching new attacks on cargo ships in the Strait of Hormuz, and we have wild stuff happening going down nonstop, and this week is about to be insane for geopolitics, to say the least. But Enforcer, what say you?
And of course, we're going to be covering the breaking news as it is coming out live on air, as we have been tracking and watching the developing story of the major drone attack that the armed forces of Ukraine is currently conducting on the Russian capital, the city of Moscow. At this moment, Ukrainian forces have conducted a beeline attack directly against the city, striking straight through the main part of Russia's air defenses to the southwestern area of the city, and have currently made it within several kilometers of the Kremlin. Drones have been reported to be shot down on the area of the Moskvil-Moskvaya Ulitsa Street, which is several kilometers away from the Kremlin and directly across the Moskva River from the very heart of the Russian Federation's government and government facilities. Drones have also been reported around the Russian Ministry of Defense building, and it also appears that Russian air defense has attempted and has been successful in some cases cases in shooting down these drones, but nevertheless, we are also hearing additional information that more waves are on the way at this moment, and Ukrainian drones are still probing and striking into the Russian airspace around the capital city of Moscow. Major drone attacks are simultaneously happening throughout the country elsewhere, in cities such as Voronezh, the city of Ufa, also cities just to the direct west of the city of Ufa, and we've also been able to get additional details and reports from the area around the city of St. Petersburg, as another large flight of drones has been flying into the Leningrad military district and attempting to strike significant strategic targets within this area. Currently, at this moment in time, it has been confirmed that this is one of the largest and most overwhelming drone attacks that the armed forces of Ukraine have been able to throw at the Russian Federation. And at the moment, we have already been able to confirm before we went live on air that the Ukrainian armed forces have already set records for making it as deep into the city of Moscow as they ever have in this attack that is ongoing at the moment right now. We have also been able to hear other major developments in the news from around the world, including that out of the Middle East, as the United States of America has announced Operation Freedom, which will be an attempt, or Project Freedom as it's specifically called, which will be an attempt by the United States Navy to begin armed escorts of commercial vessels or merchant ships through the area of the Strait of Hormuz. This also confirms that our information yesterday, as far as preliminary analysis, was correct on the channel, that the IRGC was laying further mines with their fast attack boat swarms inside the Strait of Hormuz, and the Islamic Republic of Iran has reiterated that any attempts by the United States through force of arms to violate the ongoing Iranian blockade within the strait will be met by significant attacks by drone forces, anti-ship missile forces, and any other available anti-ship weaponry and anti-ship forces that they may have within the area of the Strait of Hormuz or within the southwestern area of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Iranian government also announced the beginning of military operations to break the U.S. blockade at the mouth of the Gulf of Oman, while simultaneously the Iranians have also issued threats to a large number of commercial vessels sitting at an anchorage near to the area of the city of Ras Al Khaimah, telling them that they must depart the area immediately unless if they want to be attacked by the Islamic Republic of Iran. Dozens of vessels are currently sailing west immediately, deeper into the Persian Gulf, to be able to try and avoid being hit. Several vessels were also targeted, hit, and seized today by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps within the Strait of Hormuz, suggesting that an outbreak of major conflict between the two sides, the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran, is highly likely to commence sometime soon. The Iranian government also issued new terms to the United States of America today to be able to end the war, which were akin to a demand for unconditional surrender by the United States of America and a complete cessation of U.S. military operations and sphere of influence activities by the United States of America throughout the entirety of the Middle East, to allow for a trickle of U.S. ships to be able to go through the Strait of Hormuz under Iran's oversight and control, which the United States obviously refused. We have also seen significant airlifts that are ongoing at this moment still into the Middle East, which is once again suggesting that military operations in full form by the United States will be commencing here soon. We have an unbelievable amount of breaking news, and we actually have breaking news coming out minute by minute at this moment from both developing situations inside of the Russian Federation and within the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Yeah, we actually have some breaking news coming out right now. It looks like we are seeing the drone attack continue on Russia. It looks like there are currently fires burning in the Luhansk Oblast in Alchevsk following an FP2 strike against Russian targets. So this was a very large attack, by the way. Last night, we saw the Ukrainians attack the Primorsk oil port toward the northern part of Russia. That was a very big attack, and we saw the fires from that on the NASA firm satellite. And this evening, we're now seeing that Ukraine's gone for basically the biggest goal possible, which is actually hitting central Moscow itself. So that's wild. That's certainly something crazy. And what's even crazier than that is Moscow has literally been bolstering their air defenses over the past week with over 200 of their top air defense systems just to protect Putin and his cronies, and they still were not able to protect the city. That's why we're seeing explosions right now in Moscow, but that's wild to see. Also, we are getting some more live news out of Iran about what's going on right now with CENTCOM and the upcoming Strait of Hormuz escorts that will be happening here shortly. So it's really wild. Like it's going down today on a Sunday. Everybody thought it was gonna be quiet today, but it's definitely not. But unfortunately, that's what we have right now. Just wanted to go over that breaking news in Luhansk.
These major actions are going to be laying out the atmosphere and the tempo of how things are going to be going for the next week without a doubt. With the statements that have been made by the United States at this moment and have been corroborated by Central Command's area of responsibility, along with the major Ukrainian drone attacks currently still ongoing on Moscow, we can understand that the war in Ukraine and the war in the Middle East will most likely be ramping up in fervor and ferocity over the next week in response to these incidents by the state of Ukraine and the United States of America over the course of this day. Moving us on and into all of the news that we have and all of the breaking news that is coming out at this moment right now, we have been able to hear of significant developments that are currently happening within the area of the city of Moscow. As many of you all have known, coming onto the stream right now, the armed forces of Ukraine have conducted massive and significant drone attacks against the Russian Federation within just the past few hours. We have been able to hear that within some of the areas that are currently under an active drone threat, to summarize it without naming off every single oblast, the entirety of southwestern Russia within the southern military district and most of the Moscow military district are currently under the threat of an ongoing drone attack at this moment right now, with a large amount of confirmed hits already being made and news coming in that there may be an incoming second wave on Moscow and several other cities that we are going to be watching and covering live on air. A large amount of these drones made it immediately to the Moscow air defense perimeter, which is one of the most significant and well-built air defense perimeters for a major metropolitan area inside the Russian Federation. The Moscow air defense perimeter does largely create a crescent shape around the area of the city of Moscow, encompassing light air defenses to medium air defenses around the city of Leningrad, somewhat medium defenses all the way down to Krasnoznamensk, which is along the outer ring road of the city of Moscow, heavy air defenses between Krasnoznamensk and Podolsk, and fairly heavy air defenses between Podolsk and Brunitsy, which are some of the suburbs of the city of Moscow. This, in turn, makes the air defense perimeter that we are largely seeing as being overrun at this moment right now. And this air defense perimeter is the very barrier and protector that the city of Moscow needs to be able to ensure that Ukrainian drone attacks do not cause significant damage or threaten central government buildings within the inner area of Moscow. According to information we have had over the past 2 hours, Ukrainian drone attacks immediately went for and attempted to pass through the heaviest areas of air defense that the Russian Federation has for the city of Moscow between the Krasnoznamensk and Podolsk area of the air defense ring and also the Podolsk and Brunitsky front. Ukrainian drones in such large numbers were able to break through this outer air defense perimeter and were able to make it all the way into the very inner ring roads of the city of Moscow. Most air defenses around Moscow are prioritized around the area of the A113 road. This is one of the more significant ones, and where most of the metropolitan center lies within is within the inner perimeter of the A113 road. Maybe that's important to stop Ukrainian drones there, as industrial facilities, government facilities in large population areas, equivalent to 10% of the Russian Federation's population, lies within the area of this outer ring road. These drones were able to not only make it through that air defense perimeter, but made it into the very metropolitan heart of the city. Confirmation has come out that a drone was shot down around the area of the Moskva-Molskaya Ulitsa Street, which is a major roadway that passes through this area near to the area of the Vorbyevi Gory Park here on the Moskva River, and at its closest is only about, and to make sure that we measure this accurately here, only about 3 miles away from the very outer perimeter of the Kremlin. One drone was shot down here by some form of Russian air defense, of which we are unsure the type or variety, but the debris from the falling drone and its impact in the streets can be seen in this picture right here, clearly showing that the drones are making it within less than 3 miles of the Kremlin. This is the closest in the history of the war that a large drone attack and conventional Ukrainian drone forces have been able to make it to the Kremlin. Only one such incident...
Also, by the way, you got to note this real quick, because I see people mentioning this right now. Remember that the May 9th Victory Day parade, which is already severely scaled back because Russia doesn't have the equipment to spare for the parade, that is going to be taking place in just about 6 days. And we're seeing today on May the 3rd, which is just obviously 6 days ahead of the parade, we're seeing Ukraine launch an attack literally just miles away from the street in which the V-Day parade will be held. So that's a pretty big deal right there. I wonder what the Russians are going to do about that, because like I mentioned,
city of Moscow. Another important thing to note to everyone right now about this attack that we've seen here is that there was one...
We have got a poll going on, y'all. We do have a poll going on right now. over on YouTube. Like I said, we do have a poll going on. Like I said, lines are still open for call-ins, so keep that in mind. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and make sure that you hit that bell button so everybody gets notified.
Drone at the Russian flag, flying over the dome of the Sinetsky Dvorets building, which you can actually see right there. That attack is not similar in the type that we're seeing right now, as these drones were confirmed to have been launched from the territory of Ukraine in the dozens, flown 350 miles through Russia continuously, reached the Moscow air defense perimeter, breached it, and then made it all the way into the actual metropolitan heart of the city of Moscow, and well, quite literally within spitting distance of major governmental buildings. As a matter of fact, if we measure the parallel of where this drone landed near to the area of the Moskvaya Ulitsa, we can actually see that the Russian Ministry of Defense building is quite literally in line with where that drone was shot down, meaning that if that drone was flying towards the Kremlin just 2 miles over to the east, it actually would have been shot down, crashed, and exploded on top of the Russian Ministry of Defense building, which is the Russian equivalent of the Pentagon, giving you all an idea of how far this has made it into Moscow. To also put this into an American perspective, so that way everyone can kind of get an idea of the distance, this would be like a drone attempting to make it to the White House, and that drone would be shot down somewhere over the area of the U.S., actually, funnily enough, quite literally almost over the U.S. Pentagon in distance. That is how close this drone made it to the Kremlin at this moment right now, which is a significant breakthrough for the armed forces of Ukraine, and once again showing that with a superior number of drones, the Ukrainians can actually overwhelm the Russian air defenses in Moscow and make it all the way to the Kremlin itself.
Yeah, and there was a lot of drones that flew in. Like, there was drones going to all kinds of different targets. Like, they were going to Luhansk, they were going to Moscow, they were going all over the place. But they specifically sent quite a few just to central Moscow alone. And like we saw, some of them made it through. This one right here in the picture got shot down, but the debris still caused damage right here in central Moscow. But do you have that video to show the people real quick? The one where all the drones are flying in? Like, it's just nonstop drone noise coming into Moscow on the cameras.
I believe, is this it?
Yeah, that's it right here, actually.
All right, and let's take a listen to this one, folks, because this one was taken a little bit south, about 2 miles away from the area where that last drone went down that we were just showing y'all. And there's the sound of several drones flying all the way into central Moscow. Quite a large number of them that could be heard, at least 3 of them that were somewhere out in the distances that cameraman was filming the incoming drones. We also got a little bit of additional footage here. This is showing the response on the area of the Moskvaya Ulitsa Street, which was only about 3 miles away from the Kremlin at the site of impact. We also understand that a second drone also hit the larger high-rise here, we believe due to some form of electronic warfare interference or some other incident akin to that, as it does appear that these drones were attempting to fly deeper into Moscow by the time they actually fell to the ground and exploded somewhere around the area of that street. We also were able to see a little bit of duplicate footage of this location and the scene, and we also saw right here, once again, the debris field that had been made within that area. We've also been able to see more videos of the incoming drones as well, largely duplicates of them that we were able to make sure to put down on the map, and we also were able to get a closer up look at the wreckage on that high-rise, or more so the damage, which could be seen here to once again show that the Ukrainian drone appears to have run headlong into this building in Moscow as it was attempting to make it even further into the city. We're not really sure what their targets were, as these drones were flying directly into the heart of Moscow and right at the Kremlin, and this leads us to wonder what in the world was the actual purpose behind this drone attack that was conducted today. We consider it highly unlikely that the Ukrainian armed forces were attempting a direct attack that would target, damage, or destroy any of the historic or UNESCO heritage site structures of the Kremlin itself, and those generally wouldn't pose any strategic benefit or advantage to the armed forces of Ukraine if they were to hit them. We believe that this attack was more so conducted just for the pure symbolism and imagery that it would depict in the Russian Federation that not even the Kremlin itself is safe from Ukrainian drones flying overhead, and in theory, on any given day, like the 9th of May, a similar drone swarm could fly into central Moscow and start targeting and ripping apart thousands of Russian soldiers while they're standing in parade formation on Red Square if the Ukrainians ever decided on a whim that they would like to conduct such an action. It most likely is being conducted to sow fear into the citizenry of the city of Moscow, and to also see that the Russian government has enough concern put within their minds that they would actually cancel the Victory Day parade that would be conducted on the 9th of May. Right now, a lot of people are actually talking about what this is going to be resulting in as far as a Russian response, considering that, once again, this is the largest attack we've ever seen that has made it this far into the center of the city of Moscow. And Matthew, what are people saying right now about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so it's a very rare sight to see Ukraine actually attacking central Moscow. That is not a common thing we've seen so far. We'll see generally the Moscow Oblast, meaning the Moscow region, will get attacked, but this was very close to the seat of government inside of Russia. So they're definitely trying to make a point. That's obvious. And we've also seen multiple explosions in a high rise. We saw one on a street. We saw explosions all over the place in Moscow. So what is going to happen as a result of this very rare attack? 55% said Putin will probably start a major provocation as a result. 22% said Putin will definitely cancel the May 9th Victory Day parade, and 17% said Putin will largely ignore this hit. So one thing I think they might try to do here, because they've already prepared pretty strongly for some type of Ukrainian attack on the parade, I think they might be on the verge of canceling it because, number one, they don't have any military equipment to show in the parade. That's a huge problem. And also, number two, right now they're very worried that the Ukrainians are going to conduct a strike on it. So between those two concerns, I think they might be leaning toward canceling it. But the bigger concern is this. We've been hearing about all kinds of activity inside of Belarus that's very unusual, and we've been hearing that directly from the Ukrainians, and this might be the start of a major provocation by the Russians, either getting the Belarusians to attack Ukraine, or maybe the Russians might try to escalate in some way, maybe with a bigger missile or something like that, on Ukrainian targets. That's always a risk when things like this happen, and we haven't heard yet a response from Putin, because of course this just happened literally just about an hour ago, and it's still ongoing as we speak. So we're waiting to get a response from the Kremlin, but I'm with the 55%. Something is probably going to come out of this. I don't think they're going to ignore it, and they'll also probably cancel the parade as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have a feeling that the Russian Federation is going to be fairly stretched to be able to launch a major provocation. While they certainly would love to launch a major provocation in response to this incident, the Russian Federation is militarily stretched to its absolute maximum in terms of conventional responses that could be made. There is a possibility of opening a new front on the Belarusian border that could be conducted, but from what we hear right now, the Ukrainian armed forces and their intelligence have not been able to ascertain whether or not the forces moving near to the Belarusian border are Russian. They may largely be Belarusian, and with that given as a fact, if we were to assume that, the Belarusian armed forces are highly unlikely to launch any form of an offensive into the state of Ukraine. The Belarusian armed forces are an independent fighting force in technicality from the Russian Federation, but since 2006, the Belarusian armed forces has been specifically structured as a supporting and logistical force for Russian overseas operations within the Belarusian territory, meaning that most of their armed forces, and if you do look, you will largely see this as well, are largely based towards supporting a larger armed force on their territory than actually conducting their own completely self-sufficient military operations. This means that an attempt at a Belarusian an invasion of northern Ukraine or a Belarusian expeditionary force attempting to launch an offensive into Ukraine would most likely be unsuccessful, as they have a very low amount of combatant forces. We also know that a decent amount of their armor has already been stripped away in prior times and donated to the Russians for them to be able to use in Ukraine, as unit markings have shown that a large amount of Russian T-72s that were used in the middle part of 2025 and the latter part of 2024 were in fact provided by the Republic of Belarus, and that means that they're largely lacking any conventional offensive capabilities. We also understand that the Belarusian armed forces do not possess or use any significant amounts of drone forces either, and it looks like they're largely falling behind the curve, and while the Russians are trying to help them them a little bit materially with fixing that shortcoming, the Belarusians are nowhere close to implementing any level of drone warfare that even the Russian Federation is able to leverage on the field, meaning that they would largely be sitting ducks for Ukrainian counterattacks, and the losses would be exorbitantly high, most likely wiping out most of their combatant units within the opening months or opening weeks of a conflict with the armed forces of Ukraine, meaning that that sort of an outcome would be unlikely. That means that the Russians are now forced into looking into either ramping up conventional attacks or moving on to what would only be undescribable, which would be a tactical nuclear option against the armed forces of Ukraine. Currently, under Russian nuclear doctrine, they could try and make a justification to tactically nuke the Ukrainians, but that would be an incredibly difficult one to sell to the Russian public, to the greater world, and also, much like with the United States considering the use of a tactical nuclear weapon on the Islamic Republic of Iran, that is opening up a Pandora's box to where every country on the planet that is nuclear armed, when facing a minor inconvenience in a conventional war, immediately starts lobbing tactical nuclear weapons like it's some sort of a party favor to the enemy forces that they're fighting, meaning that the Russians will most likely not easily make that decision if that is one that is being considered. So right now, the Russians are fairly spent. I don't really think they're going to be able to do that much, to be entirely honest, to respond to this, but I'm sure that they would want to respond if they had some way to be able to do that effectively in a conventional sense. But with that, we are going to be moving on to additional bits of news that we did get out of Moscow as well, as in the midst of this ongoing drone attack, the Russian Federation did announce today that they'll be receiving about $2.7 billion in extra revenue from the increasing oil prices around the world. Right now, the Russian Federation is finding it very difficult, and will be finding it even more difficult, to be able to ship out any oil due to the Ukrainian drone attacks knocking out most of their oil loading ports. But even still, with a little bit that is getting out, it is seeing an increase in $2.7 billion in revenue as a result of the rapidly increasing oil prices globally because of the ongoing blockade within the Strait of Hormuz, showing that the Russian Federation is getting a bit of an economic reprieve, but not that great of a one, by the ongoing blockade in the Hormuz and the rapidly rising oil prices. But while the Russian Federation tried to spin the story as a positive one today, it didn't really look that positive around most of the country, especially when we start to cover all of the other attacks that were conducted simultaneously outside of Moscow during the Ukrainian drone attack over the course of these past few hours. But before we move on into the rest of the country and the major news that's come out from multiple different areas, we do have to talk about the situation with Moscow, because we do understand that Putin did transfer 280 air defense systems to Moscow, which, mind you all, is about enough for an entire group army or a combined arms army of the Russian Federation to be able to protect the city for the Victory Day parade. And even with all of that air defense relocated into Moscow, Ukrainian drones still made it pretty much to the Kremlin itself in the city. And this has started to lead a lot of people to wonder if Russian air defenses are woefully inadequate, which we obviously all know, but even with the large number, is Moscow completely helpless? So Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so there's only two places in Russia that generally have air defense that's worthwhile, and it's Putin's dachas, which means his mansions, and it's also central Moscow. That's because, if you might notice, those are the two places that Putin loves to hang out, and that's where the air defenses are at. So he felt it very, very kind to move 280 more systems toward Moscow for the V-Day parades, and he'll also be there at that as well. So what are your thoughts? Now that they have all this air defense there, they still got attacked by Ukraine, they still had explosions, and they were still targeted by the drones, and there was not much they could really do about it. They shot down one of them, but one of them hit a skyscraper outside of Moscow, so that's not good. But what do you think? 48% said Moscow is largely helpless, while 22% said their air defense probably isn't operational yet, they're probably still setting it up, and 19% said Moscow can protect itself just fine. And I would say Moscow is in foul shape. If they have 280 plus air defense systems in Moscow right now and they are set up and they can't defend their skies more effectively than what we saw today, then they are screwed at this point, which also, by the way, that does seem to line up with the foul reports we've gotten about Russian air defense systems. They didn't work well in Venezuela. They don't work well pretty much wherever these systems are at. They're usually failing for the most part. And it looks like they're once again not doing a great job in Moscow. Even in large numbers, they're still not doing well. So I would say Moscow is largely helpless from the looks of it. Imagine this. Imagine if Ukraine decided to strike the Kremlin. I mean, that's something that they could have done because they got within the vicinity of it during this current attack. attack. I think Moscow would have been in some deep trouble if they did that. So, I'm sure they're panicking about that situation, but I would say I'm with the 48%. But Enforcer, what say you?
Most everywhere within the Russian Federation is largely helpless to Ukrainian drone attacks, as Russian air defense technologically is woefully inadequate to the modern environments or modern air scenarios that they have to face themselves against and try and shoot down. And not only that, we are starting to believe that at this point, just due to the incredibly bad success rate that Russian air defenses have around the entirety of the world on detecting any threat on radar, that a large amount of the radars may be faulty, ineffective, or built with such a large issues in quality control that they largely are only there for show. We have seen that almost every air defense system that the Russian Federation fields, including the Tor M1, the Tor M2, the Buk M1, the Buk M2, and the Buk M3, the S300s, S400s, and S500s, the, I'm missing a couple, the 2S Tunguska, the 2S1 Pantsir, and a myriad of other air defense systems, largely derivatives or variants of those air defense platforms, have had some of the worst success rates that we've ever seen in successfully intercepting and shooting down incoming threats. If anything, we usually see that they don't even detect incoming air threats, and the only way that they know that an air threat is in the area is when their radar system gets blown up. That might not even be working. So with that in mind, we generally do believe that Moscow is largely helpless, and most other areas of the Russian Federation, regardless the number of air defenses, are most likely helpless as well, as Russian air defenses are so bad off technologically and as far as they're able to operate, and as far as the operators are able to run them, that they may as well not even be within the area that they're attempting to defend. It may as well be like they were never even there. So I'd had to be with the 48%. Moscow is largely helpless, even with the large amount of air defenses, a combined arms army's worth, that has been relocated around the city to be able to try and defend it for this parade. This will most likely lead to the decision by the Russian government to cancel the May 9th parade in Moscow due to the threat of drone attacks wiping out hundreds, if not thousands, of soldiers that will be standing in parade formation on the Red Square for hours before the parade even begins. So with that, it is time for us to move on out of the major breaking news from Moscow. And once again, folks, we are trying to cover the breaking news as it happens live. So we may return to Moscow at any moment to be able to try and cover any of the major developments that are additionally going on within the area, as we are once again getting indications that there may be another incoming drone attack on that area, or at least another wave of drones that are attempting to enter the area. But this is going to be leading us on and up into the area of the Leningrad Military District. The Leningrad Military District has also been running into a significant amount of difficulties over the course of this day, as a significant number of drones has been seen flying into the area of the Leningrad region, and it once again does appear that they are attempting to target industries around the St. Petersburg city area, and also the ports of Ust-Luga and Primorsk, which are significant oil loading ports for the Russian Federation that helps the Russians to be able to ship their sanctioned oil overseas, and to be able to try and turn a dollar to keep financing their war, and to try and keep the Russian economy alive to a small extent, as long as they possibly can, given the dire situation they find themselves in right now. There's one of the drones actually flying over what we believe to be the southern outskirts of St. Petersburg. We also have another clip here from the Leningrad region. You can actually hear the drone lightly in the distance.
Как поют птицы красиво и
Apparently the birds are out too.
Man, the birds are louder than the drone somehow. Like, that's kind of wild.
И это уже 8-й.
We also got this clip as well. And we hear it coming on in, and there it goes, actually, right there. Another Liudi. And we also have one last clip here, once again showing us a fire that appears to have broken out around the area of Primorsk. We were able to confirm that there are ongoing fires within the northern part of the Primorsk facility, which we can actually see on the map right here. And it does appear that the Ukrainian armed forces have specifically targeted and attempted to damage this facility and this general area for an important reason. This is some of the only air defenses that are actually based and operating around the area of Ust-Luga. If you look right up here, you can actually see a Panzer S1 truck sitting on top of a large berm that's been built for it, and a concrete ramp that was also made for the vehicle to be able to drive up there to this point and back down to be able to rearm and repair whenever it's necessary, or to replace the system if for some reason it has some sort of a technical breakdown. It also does appear that the Ukrainian armed forces are conducting this attack not only to cause damage to the oil loading facility, but to also ensure that further attacks on the actual Primorsk facility are able to go forward with greater success, considering that most Russian air defense units around the port will have been destroyed or knocked out by this time when we see the next Ukrainian drone attacks coming on in. But outside of that, we actually have some news that's coming out of Iran at this very moment right now, and speaking of which, we're actually going to use this as a little bit of a segue for a moment to be able to move down into that major breaking news and start covering the situation that's going down in the Middle East. So Matthew, what news are we getting at this moment right now?
Okay, so it looks like Twitter's having some small issues right now, but I am able to get it to work, thankfully, on a second device, so I'm able to see it still. But we are getting some pretty big news out of Iran, and right now, the big deal is there was an announcement by the president that apparently the U.S. Navy will start guiding ships, that's cargo ships, through the Strait of Hormuz, past the Iranian blockade, of course. So, Enforcer, if we could go ahead and pull that post up, let's start with that, and then we'll go through the whole thing, because the news I have here, you kind of have to go through the whole thing first to tell people what's going on before this news makes sense that just came out. So if we could just get a quick rundown of everything happening with that.
All right, so we're going to be actually go in and start covering this a little bit as much as we can, trying to balance speed with also detail, because this is a major part of the news tonight. But we have been able to hear that the United States of America has announced Project Freedom, which I'll just read you all the statement from the president to be able to give you all the summary of what's going to be going on here soon. And also, by the way, folks, just for the sake of making sure that this is not misinterpreted in any way, and we just read the words directly and take them literally for what they are, we're going to read the entire statement without any censors on our end to try and block or not really cover anything that may be deemed political. So, countries from all over the world, almost all of which are not involved in the Middle Eastern dispute going on so visibly and violently for all to see, have asked the United States if we could help free up their ships, which are locked up in the Strait of Hormuz, on something which they have absolutely nothing to do with. They are merely neutral and innocent bystanders. For the good of Iran, the Middle East, and the United States, we have told these countries that we will guide their ships safely out of these restricted waterways so that they can freely and ably get on with their business. Again, these are ships from areas of the world that there are not in any way involved with that which is currently taking place in the Middle East. I told my representatives to inform them that we will use best efforts to get their ships and crews safely out of the strait. In all cases, they said they will not be returning until the area becomes safe for navigation and everything else. This process, Project Freedom, will begin Monday morning, Middle East time. I'm fully aware that my representatives are having very positive discussions with the country of Iran, and that these discussions could lead to something very positive for all. The ship movement is merely meant to free up people, companies, and countries that have done absolutely nothing wrong. They are victims of circumstance. This is a humanitarian gesture on behalf of the United States, Middle Eastern countries, but in particular the country of Iran. Many of these ships are running low on food and everything else necessary for large-scale crews to stay on board in a healthy and sanitary manner. I think it would go a long way to show in showing goodwill on behalf of all of those who have been fighting so strenuously over the last number of months. If in any way this humanitarian process is interfered with, that interference will, unfortunately, have to be dealt with forcefully. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President of the United States of America. So it does appear that a new operation has been announced, which is Operation Freedom, and we have also been able to get additional information as well on the situation in the following statement from CENTCOM's Area of Responsibility. And this is the publication from Tampa, Florida, CENTCOM's headquarters, on what they are saying Operation or Project Freedom is actually going to encompass and entail. The U.S. Central Command forces will begin supporting Project Freedom on May 4th to restore freedom of navigation for commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. The mission, directed by the President, will support merchant vessels seeking to freely transit through the essential international trade corridor. A quarter of the world's oil trade at sea and significant volumes of fuel and fertilizer products are transported through the strait. In quotes from Admiral Brad Cooper, our support for this defensive mission protection is essential to regional security and the global economy, as we also maintain the naval blockade. Last week, the U.S. Department of State announced a new initiative in partnership with the Department of Defense to enhance coordination and information sharing among international partners in support of maritime security in the Strait. The Maritime Freedom Construct aims to combine diplomatic action with military coordination, which will be critical during Project Freedom. U.S. military support to Project Freedom will include guided missile destroyers, over 100 land and sea-based aircraft, multi-domain unmanned platforms, which are drones, and 15,000 service members. This appeared to be...
Wow. So it sounds like to me, and of course, there's a couple of different interpretations running around about what this means. The main interpretation is that they're saying the U.S. Navy is going to start escorts of cargo ships and oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, literally straight through the Iranian blockade, right in the middle of the strait. That's the interpretation number one. But interpretation number two is there are some people out there saying that the U.S. Navy is not going to be escorting ships, and they'll simply be on standby in case one of these ships gets attacked. The U.S. Navy will show up and defend those cargo ships. It appears to me that they are definitely going to be escorting ships. That's what I'm getting out of this announcement. And not only that, but it sounds like the U.S. Navy is going to basically start an entire operation to reopen the entire Strait of Hormuz, not just escorting ships. So to me, it sounds like the full whammy. It sounds like they're about to start the whole thing with this in probably just a few hours, actually, because they said in Middle Eastern time, which means, that's right around the corner, actually. So it sounds like a pretty big operation.
It sounds like it's certainly going to be a rather large one, and this might also be the reason why we saw that Admiral Cooper, or Admiral Brad Cooper, who is the CENTCOM commander, was actually on board and touring the USS Tripoli the other day to be able to make sure that all ships within that amphibious ready group, and also all of the ships of that task force that are currently conducting the blockade, understand their operations and their roles that they will be conducting as a part of Project Freedom here in a short while. This operation is open to a little bit of interpretation, and some discussion in the public as to what exactly supporting freedom of navigation means. But when we look at prior historical examples of the United States supporting or encouraging freedom of navigation, it becomes incredibly clear what this will entail. In multiple prior incidents over the term of the, and just to make sure that we clearly state them to remind everyone that this is very recent, of the current Trump administration and the former Biden administration, we did see that a significant amount of actions were taken by U.S. surface vessels in U.S. Indo-PACOM's area of responsibility to support freedom of navigation operations within the Strait of Taiwan. This involved those guided missile destroyers physically entering and sailing through the median line of the Taiwan Strait to show to the People's Republic of China that the United States military was not going to be accepting any military coercion or pressure in their denial of passing through international waters, and also showing to the world that the United States had the confidence to do such a thing and would possibly even provide armed assistance to vessels that were attempting to transit through this international waterway between the Republic of China on the island of Taiwan and the People's Republic of China on the Chinese mainland. We've also seen the freedom of navigation operations under the Biden administration in 2024 also conducted very similar actions around the area of the Bab el-Mandeb, the opening near to the area of the Strait, well, more so the Strait of the Red Sea, as we sometimes call it on this channel. A significant amount of U.S. destroyers, numbering around 4 to 6, were almost continuously involved in patrolling and also firing upon Houthi forces that were attempting to board and destroy commercial vessels that were transiting through the area, showing that U.S. ships were physically involved in armed operations under a quote-unquote supporting freedom of navigation operation. Additionally, we've also seen similar actions such as those continuing in 2025 under the current Trump administration, once again showing a repeating pattern that freedom of navigation support by the U.S. Navy usually involves physically going into that location and also firing upon hostile forces. We also understand that way back in the day, during the Obama administration, at the height of the Somali pirate crisis, that U.S. forces were involved in a multinational coalition to be able to hunt down and destroy Somali pirates as a part of a freedom of navigation operation, showing us that a large amount of historical precedent within just the past 15 years heavily indicates that any freedom of navigation operation will involve the United States either escorting these ships physically through the strait, or they will actively be inside of the strait firing upon Iranian forces that are attempting to stop any freedom of navigation. But we actually have breaking news at this moment that attacks are underway. And Matthew, what are we getting right now?
Okay, so it's not the U.S. attacking Iran. It looks like Iran has begun launching attacks. They've launched an attack on a vessel apparently 78 nautical miles north of Fujairah in the UAE. Right now, it's being reported that the crew is safe at this time, but they have come under attack, apparently by a missile, a rocket, or some projectile, apparently right now. We do have that post on our Twitter page, and it looks like it was reported by a company security officer on board the vessel to the Maritime Trade Organization, and we do see that right there. So apparently it's right at the tip of the UAE right there in the Strait of Hormuz. So Iran has restarted their missile attacks as of right now. They've restarted it, and this is ahead of the talks about the U.S. trying to reopen and escort ships in the Strait of Hormuz. So it looks like it's started.
And really quickly, it looks like the only vessel that I can see right now around this area may be the motor vessel Al Abdul, and I cannot get the full name there, unfortunately, but let me see if I can. The Al Abdul Rahman, which appears to be flagged out of the Republic of India, but we're not exactly sure on the moment, as there is another vessel nearby, which is apparently a tug or a special craft, which is also within that area as well, within the general vicinity. We don't know which one of these vessels may have issued a distress call, but it does appear that some vessels, company security officer has put out a distress call that the vessel has come under attack by some form of projectile, possibly an anti-ship missile or an anti-ship drone that has been launched at the ship from the Iranian coastline just a couple of dozen miles away to the north. So it does appear that the Iranians are once again attacking commercial ships that are even close to the vicinity of the area of the Strait of Hormuz, and we already understood that that was going to be happening earlier in the day due to a significant amount of developments that happened near to an anchorage just outside of Ras Al Khaimah and also the city of Dubai. But before we move on into that news of what has been going on around the strait and all of the incidents similar to this that we can report about that have happened before this one, which is a breaking story that's happening right now live on air, I do want to make sure that we take a brief moment to talk about the announcement of Operation Freedom, which is going to be conducted by the United States Navy, because there's also a little bit of additional news that we have to give, is that the Iranians have already made a direct response to the announcement of Operation Freedom today. And this is very important information I need to get out to y'all before we start talking about y'all's opinions that y'all put down in the poll. According to information that came out today, the Iranians have threatened that they will attack U.S. vessels that attempt to pass through the area. As a source close to Ghalibaf says that Iran has begun initial military actions to lift the U.S. naval blockade. And we've also been able to hear, additionally, that according to Syed Mohammed Marandi, no ships will be allowed to exit the Persian Gulf without permission from the Iranian armed forces. Only a fool would attempt to ignore an Iranian warning, which is not a threat leveraged at the U.S. Navy. It's a threat leveraged at all of those commercial ships, basically telling them that if you try and follow the U.S. destroyers out of the Strait of Hormuz, right on their tail, we're going to try and hunt y'all down, and sink your ship, and possibly even kill you if you attempt to make that pass. Once again, putting out a pretty significant threat, especially to the merchant ships that we would be attempting to get out of the Strait of Hormuz and begin convoy duties on. A lot of people are talking about that right now at this moment. And Matthew, what are people thinking is going to be happening as a result of the announcement of Operation Freedom and Iran's public threat that has been issued today?
Okay, so right now, of course, we did see that Iran threatened immediate attacks. The U.S. Navy started escorting ships to the Strait of Hormuz. So now we've seen that they've apparently launched, from what I'm gathering at this point, multiple projectiles at a ship right off the tip of the UAE near the Strait of Hormuz. So their response, Iran's response, has already begun. They've already started attacking. So that's not a good sign. But what happens if the U.S. Navy starts to escort these ships through the Hormuz Strait? What is going to take place? 62% said Iran will attack the U.S. Navy, probably with their drone forces. 17% said the U.S. is bluffing. They probably won't end up escorting ships. And 16% said the U.S. will escort the ships, probably without an issue. And this is a little bit concerning because when we said the U.S. needs to do something, we didn't necessarily mean sending in the U.S. Navy to the Strait of Hormuz because that's risky. Iran, as we can tell, and we just saw it literally 24 hours ago, Iran still has their entire fast attack boat fleet at their disposal. Those are armed with machine guns and also possibly missile launchers as well. So that's a bit of a problem. Also, Iran does have a pretty large fleet of sea-based attack drones as well that are autonomous. They do have those, and they've used those to attack some cargo ships in the past as well. So Of course, the U.S. Navy is well armed, but they're also somewhat vulnerable to these Sea Baby drones. And not necessarily Sea Baby branded drones, but it's the same type of drone generally. It's the Iranian version of that. So they're kind of vulnerable to it. So if we try to send U.S. Navy ships in the Strait, there's always a possibility that Iran sends out a drone, hits one of our destroyers, and then we have a ship sinking in the middle of the Strait. That's always a possibility. So it's a risky operation, to say the least. And I think Iran probably almost certainly will try to attack with those drones. And I'm not sure exactly what the U.S. is planning on doing to combat that threat, because, that's a threat that we've been talking about for some time. And the U.S. appears to be going for one of the riskiest options possible with responding to the Strait of Hormuz being closed. So I'm with a 62%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 62%. This is an incredibly risky operation that risks high amounts of direct losses for the United States Navy in terms of surface combatant vessels, personnel, and also the safety of the vessels involved as well. Currently, no preliminary operations have been conducted by the United States military, or softening operations, as some would call them, to be able to try and clear out the significant threats that Iranian anti-ship forces pose around the area of the Strait. Currently, the entirety of the center of the Strait of Hormuz, including a large part of the United Arab Emirates and the nation of Oman's waters,
So we are starting to get daylight over in Iran and Israel and stuff. So we are thinking either attacks are going to start, or I'm sorry, attacks. The escorting of ships. I apologize for that. Yes, the escorts of ships that's going to the Strait of Hormuz should be probably starting today, this morning, because it is something, 5:54 actually, almost 6 a.m. In Iran. Um, as you can see, we do have live coverage of the Iran and Israel to make sure that we stay up to date with the actual footage about what's going on over there. If any attacks at okay, that was it's turning daylight there, so all the cameras are switching over from night vision to regular. So we're gonna keep this on the screen for a little bit longer, and then we're gonna go back over to the news. We do have call-ins, open lines right now, y'all. So make sure y'all don't miss it. Go ahead, smash that number in. It's 540. Let me just go ahead and click over here just so I don't say the wrong number. The number is 540-251-7687. Call in and get your voice heard. See what's going on. Do y'all think that we should escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz to help actually try to help clear it out? And only block Iranian ships and whoever affiliates with Iran. So we are talking about China, Russia, India. Block all of them ships. So anything that's going to EU and stuff like that, go ahead and let that go. Anything that's coming to us, which we get like 1% of oil from there, and I think that's just to be nice. And that's what Trump said a couple months ago. But anyways, like I said, phone lines are open, so please call in and actually get your voice heard on the line. But give a shout out to your loved ones. Share the channel. We're actually coming up a little bit. We actually are starting to get a little bit more of a push to our algorithm a little bit. So hopefully we can actually get going and actually be able to get some traction back and actually start picking up speed again. We have gained some. We are gaining some new subscribers. We have shout outs though that we do need to do, and that's for sure. Um, we have Covert Recon. Appreciate the follow over there on Kick. Tavo Logic. Tell Tavo Logic. Tell Tavo Logistics over there on Kick. If I butchered that, I apologize. Um, Clyde Miller again. Appreciate that. And we do have other ones to go over to as well. So just stick with me here for 1 minute. And we're gonna go ahead and go over on here. Uh, oh, that's another thing too. Hold on a minute. Yeah, let's go ahead and fix that as well. I apologize for that over there on Twitch. Hey, look, people over there on Twitch, make sure you read what's on the screen. We have live call ins tonight, y'all. Y'all don't want to miss it. 540-251-7687. I'm not sure. I have not seen too many channels actually doing this, so hopefully this right here will actually get us to where we actually get some more traction on the channel here. I'm going to love doing this. It's going to be great communicating with our crowd, with the community. Look, I'm not getting paid doing this, y'all. I'm not getting nothing out of this. Seriously. I mean, you can see, like, I don't have that many members yet, but we are trying to build up. And the only reason why we're trying to build up is so we can get the news and none of this BS is actually going around and talk about bullhickey stuff that don't even matter. Um, this right here is straight hard facts down to the facts, down to facts, y'all. Straight facts. And that's where we're gonna keep it here on this channel. If we're wrong, we'll come right back up on live stream and let y'all know that hey, look, we was wrong, and we apologize, and we'll be the first ones to do it. We ain't gonna sit over here and make excuses. The reason why we did say that, we're gonna be straightforward. But and that's what I want. And that's what kind of news I want to hear. I don't want to hear about oh, we actually said that about this person after people finds out that it's not true. Heck with news like that. But we did see today, y'all, that we did see that oil prices. Um, let me look at it right now. Um, 1 sec, y'all. Let me get a different. So it looks like it's sitting around about $114 a barrel right now. So I mean that's a little bit down to what it was yesterday. It was 119 yesterday. So I mean we're fluctuating in the right direction. But I mean it's not really going to matter until we actually get all this other stuff out the way. And I definitely agree about actually escorting ships out of the strait. Um, but I do not agree about letting ships out of the strait. Um, I would choke and leave that blockade there and not let nobody through. Nobody. I would make them cut if they want the gas prices to go up like that. Heck them, heck them. That's what I say. Leave the strait closed. Flush them out. Their economy is crashing right now. This is the weakest we've ever had this regime in 50 years. Why to let up pressure off their neck now? Get it. Get it. You have to put your foot down on their neck and keep pressing and pressing and pressing and pressing and pressing. Until eventually they'll go back. All right, please. All right. I mean, don't get me wrong. They're ideologically uh not right in the head. Definitely not right in the head. They literally sit here and kill 45,000 people of their own people. I apologize. 45,000 of their own people dead in the street. That is insane. They literally have snipers sniping these people, and now they're saying that we shouldn't win. They wasn't a threat. They're a threat to their own people. How are they not a threat to us? But I mean, that is my view on the situation. I want to know what y'all views are. Let me know what y'all think. Let me see what y'all want to say on the chat. I want to know. Y'all want to call in. Chats are open. Y'all are more welcome to drop a chat. If y'all want to call in, numbers 540-251-7687. Lines are open.
Are currently mined with Mahan 7 and Maham 7 and Maham 3 mines. Maham 7 mines are fairly large and are capable of destroying most any merchant ship and U.S. vessel with a singular explosion along the hull. Maham 3s are largely smaller and are difficult to be able to detect with any form of an underwater radar or sonar system, meaning that they would be very difficult to pick up and be able to detect, meaning that U.S. vessels could easily sail right into one without even knowing. This means that this larger part, in red, of the Strait of Hormuz is largely shut down to any traffic. This leaves the areas that I've highlighted in purple above, Toll Booth 1 and Toll Booth 2, that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has been enforcing and operating as some of the only viable paths for U.S. warships to be able to pass through the area, with several tankers or merchant ships in tow behind them and in front of them, depending on the arrangement that they make for these convoys or escorts that will be conducted through the area. These toll booths pass directly through territorial waters of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which means that it is well within range of coastal defense forces that could fire upon the U.S. warships or the U.S. merchant ships attempting to pass through the area, and also gives next to no response time for the United States Navy's warships to be able to detect incoming threats fired from the shore and to be able to shoot them down in time before they're able to hit a merchant ship or hit the U.S. vessels directly. The fact that we're not seeing that any preliminary or preparatory clearing operations have been conducted by the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Naval Air Arm is setting the situation up to be incredibly dangerous, if not incredibly fatal, or highly fatal, or a high chance of damage being caused to the United States Navy's vessels and sailors, and also to the merchant ships that would attempt to pass through the area. This generally is a step in the right direction.
So, now, the past 2 days, Iran has had their attack boats doing missions out through the strait. And I'm not talking about like a couple ships. I'm talking about 40 to 80 ships at a time. And I mean, each of them ships can carry 1 to 2 mines at a time, I'm sure. if not more. Sure, not too many more. Probably 3 at tops if they can. If they can hold 3. Because those mines are pretty heavy. At that matter. But anyways, call lines are open, y'all. 540-251-7687. Don't miss tonight. Call in, not come on now. Call in, y'all. Well, we are open line right now. We are open. But I mean, what, an hour in? So I mean, let's get it in. Let's actually let's get some call ins going on. Let's get it jumping in here.
Direction, however, convoy escorts do have to be made eventually through the Strait of Hormuz. The issue is, however, is that it's jumping from the building blocks to do that straight to the very end conclusion. As we've laid it out here on this channel, the coastal defense forces of Iran do pose a significant threat to U.S. warships within such a small littoral area that this battlefield's inside of, meaning that while U.S. destroyers would be able to rinse an Iranian fast-to-tank boat in the Arabian Sea any day of the week, the situation is a lot different within an area as small as the Strait of Hormuz. This means that the United States Air Force and the United States Navy's air arm on board the USS Abraham Lincoln, the USS Tripoli, and the USS George H.W. Bush would have to conduct extended air operations to be able to clear out at least some of the threats that would be posed to the U.S. Navy and those merchant ships as they attempt to make this passage through this area. And that is supposed to be done before ships even start to enter the area. Once these air operations are conducted, Iranian forces would not be completely destroyed, but most of their offensive firepower that could be fired at these ships would be largely mitigated or suppressed, meaning that these vessels would be able to make the passage, and whatever threats would be posed would be small enough that they would be manageable, at least moderately, by the forces of the United States Navy. Then the Navy would have to make it to the other side, somewhere around the anchorage near Ras Al Khaimah, and then start getting ships together to follow them in a conga line right back through one of these toll routes, as this is the only area clear that they could pass through, to be able to get back out to the other side into the Gulf of Oman. This means that once they get these merchant ships together, they then have to sail through that gauntlet again. That would easily be manageable if the U.S. either physically controlled the islands that we would have to pass by, or if we had done enough preparatory operations beforehand to be able to clear out most of the threats posed to the Navy and the sailors and the merchant ships that would be passing through. However, we have not, meaning that we're largely sending these vessels into an armed gauntlet, which could pose significant risk of destroying the vessels or heavily damaging them if they attempt to pass through. I would say that this is heavily inadvisable unless we were to see some sort of actions taken at least over the next 2 to 3 weeks, where a significant air campaign is conducted to clear out at least most of these threats or effectively suppress them to make sure that the threats posed to these vessels is not so large that they become overwhelmed and then get damaged or destroyed attempting to transit through the strait.
Yeah, well, we've been seeing today, like throughout the entire day today, there's been intelligence aircraft all over the Persian Gulf and also around the Strait of Hormuz as well. There's been tanker aircraft from the U.S. Air Force, the intelligence aircraft. I would assume maybe some fighter jets, probably also in the area as well. We heard some pretty heavy fighter jet activity midway through the day in the airspace of Jordan earlier as well, and also over Iraq. So they've been deploying quite a bit of mapping technology in the strait. And I would assume they're probably getting an idea of where all the cargo ships are at, and also we know what Iran's deploying in the Strait of Hormuz right now, I'd imagine. So not totally sure what that is. I thought earlier today, I was almost certain that attacks were about to start on Iran because the amount of assets we had in the sky, and I think a lot of them are probably still in the sky right now, it was really remarkable to see it. So what do you think they were up to, by the way? What do you think they're trying to do by mapping out the area?
I think they're trying to map out the area to maybe see where the threats might be, or what kind of direct surface fire could be directed at vessels once they attempt the passage. I think that's might be what they're trying to map out. There is a possibility that they were maybe trying to map out the minefields as well within the Strait of Hormuz, but that would be fairly difficult with the kind of aircraft that we heard of in the area today, if not impossible, due to their technological limitations and their specialization for other roles. So it most likely is trying to map out the surface-based threats that might exist somewhere within the area, and the possible threats that captains would need to be aware of on the bergs that would be attempting to pass through. I also want to point this out to a lot of people right now, because a lot of people are always talking about the fast attack boats and the drones, the sea-based drones and the air-based drones that could be launched to the warships, but there is a much more permanent, or more so, I guess you could say, longer-lasting historical threat that would be posed for a U.S. warship attempting to pass through this area, which is anti-ship missiles. Anti-ship missiles are some of the most conventional anti-ship ordnance that we could ever consider as a threat within the Strait of Hormuz, and a lot of people would think as a result of that, because it's such an older weapon system compared to the sea-based and air-based drones that could be launched at them, because of their older condition, they're probably not that big of a threat. However, they are the largest threat that we would see within this area right now. If Iranian anti-ship batteries are based just 24 miles away from Toll Booth 1 or Toll Booth 2, from the point that that anti-ship missile is fired at a U.S. warship to the point that it actually makes it to impact on that warship is a time of 2 minutes. That means that a U.S. warship, would have the amount of time to detect, lock onto, and attempt to shoot down and destroy every anti-ship missile fired at them during the time it would take to cook a Hot Pocket in a microwave, just to give you an idea of how little of an amount of time that is. That amount of time requires them to be able to identify on an air search or surface search radar an incoming anti-ship missile that has been fired at them, for the weapons control officer to be able to identify that it is an incoming Vampire, which is an anti-ship missile or some form of missile directed at the ship, to be able to communicate that possibly to the captain that there is an incoming threat, to be able to get authorization to return fire, to then return fire with the weapon that would be appropriate at that range to shoot down the missile, which at that point, the missile is most likely going to be less than 7 miles to 5 miles away from the ship. And then you have to hope that within the next 30 seconds, that missile is somehow shot down. And it won't just be one of them fired. Usually anti-ship missiles, due to how interceptor warfare works in the modern day, are usually fired en masse, meaning that more than 4 to 8 of these missiles could be fired at a single time at a U.S. warship or the convoy, attempting to hit either the Burke or the multiple merchant vessels that are following behind it as it's trying to lead them out. And you most likely have less than a 30 to 40 second window at that point to actually start firing at that incoming anti-ship missile and shoot it down. That amount of time is near impossible, if not insane, for a U.S. Navy warship to be able to operate off of. Surface ships operate off of a concept that air defense threats are usually going to be fired from over 70 miles away at a minimum. Littoral combat ships are more so geared to this type of warfare, but even at these kinds of ranges, it would be insane, if not nearly impossible, for a littoral combat ship, which is built for littoral warfare like this, to be able to deal with those threats properly and to have the ammunition to be able to survive the entire passage of the strait, which could take several hours from beginning to end. And during those several hours, they could easily find that multiple threats like that appear and attempt to hit and destroy the ship during its passage into the Persian Gulf, and then also on its way out, which is once again a voyage of an even longer amount of time, as the vessels would then be dependent on the slowest speed of the merchant ships they're escorting to be able to make their passage back out of the strait, because the warships can't just go 30 knots and leave behind a tanker that can only go 10, because then that means it's not being covered and it would be open to being fired upon and destroyed at that point. So this is a fairly difficult sort of a situation. I think that a lot of y'all can see, once we start to lay out the technicalities of what kind of threats would exist, what would have to be done, and how they would have to get through, that sending warships through in this kind of a condition, and also asking merchant ships to blindly follow them back out of the strait, could be akin to a one-way mission for most of these sailors and most of these ships that we might dedicate to this attempt.
Yeah, but get this, though. I mean, right now inside of Iran, it is 4:04 a.m., so it's solidly Monday morning in Iran right now. So that was when this whole situation with the U.S. escorts was supposed to start happening, according to the post that we got from the U.S. officials. So, I mean, a ship just tried to pass through and just got hit by a missile. And where's the U.S. Navy at? I don't see the U.S. Navy anywhere near the ship protecting it. We haven't heard anything about it. So I don't know if that ship maybe was relying on the U.S. statement and trying to run the blockade that Iran's imposing to get through, and maybe they got hit. Possibly that was it. But it's like, Is the U.S. really intending to send ships in, or was it just like best wishes, and they're not actually going to send the Navy in? They're simply telling people that, we'll be here for moral support, but good luck to you. I can't really tell at this point because it looks like this first ship here has already gotten hit.
It does appear that the first ship got hit. It doesn't even look like it was a part of any larger U.S. operation, because the UK MTO warning that came out, just to show you all this, came out right here. And that looks to be right on the coast of Oman, about right here or so. And really quickly, Matthew, can you find us, let me see if I can find this really quickly before I even start extrapolating on this further. Depth charts. Let's see, Strait of Hormuz. Because we need to see what the depth charts show for this area right now. Let me see if I can find one. Yeah, so there's going to be some issues with trying to get anything through here, because it looks like, it looks like that'd be a problem. So generally, you can't really sail tankers through that area, and this is where the problem is right now. Is that this area, and I was thinking that it probably would be the case, is a whole bunch of rocky shoals and reefs that exist between these smaller islands right here, which is why we've only been watching, and a lot of observant people would notice this, that Indian sailing ships have really only been the type of ship that's been able to pass through here, because they're the only one with, I believe it's called the draught, which is the amount of hull that's below the waterline, that is small enough or shallow enough to be able to pass over these rocky shoals and reefs that exist right north of the coast of Oman. A tanker would not be able to pass through, especially one that's laden with oil. Vessels that are laden with oil, like large oil tankers, lay pretty low in the waterline and are generally going to be running right into these reefs or shoals, and a U.S. warship would most likely do that as well, meaning that they only have two options, at least for these larger ships. They either have to go through the minefield, which is a death sentence at this point, because we're assuming that there's now hundreds of mines in that area, because of the swarms that keep going out there from the IRGC and dropping more mines in the dozens every few days into that area. Or, once again, they have to go in between Larak and Kashem Island, or they have to go south of Larak Island, where the minefield does not exist, to be able to try and make it through, which puts them well within a crisis zone. If the Iranians fire at them, they basically have no response time to be able to shoot down whatever the Iranians just shot at them from the coastline. So this situation is rather serious. And this vessel, by the way, mind you all, was hit right off of the coast of Oman. And the U.S. Navy was not there to support it. It isn't a part of larger attempts of Project Freedom to get ships through, but it was hit. And once again, which this is incredibly obvious, the Iranians have the ability to fire all the way across this little bathtub of water that exists here in the Strait and hit anything, whether it's on the southern end of the minefield trying to skirt over the shoals and reefs, or if it's right off of their coast, which is a lot easier to do. And they've already proven that they could do both of these. So quite a significant issue, I would say, to the least. And the situation could be fixed, but not immediately, if we conducted air operations and maybe limited ground incursions on the islands in that area to be able to create a safer environment for passages. Because right now we're basically sending warships into a death gauntlet nearly, and kind of just expecting them to survive.
Yeah, to say a death gauntlet, that's kind of understating it, because if you really think about it, I mean, there's probably a ton of mines right now in the Strait of Hormuz, in that international water section right there that you've highlighted in red. We don't even know how many mines are in there at this point. It's at least 12, and it's probably a lot more than that, because when we saw those fast attack boats go out yesterday on the satellite images that we went over last night on the stream, apparently they were laying more mines from the sound of it. Now today, it seems like people are confirming that apparently they were laying more mines. And that's what we speculated was the case last night. We said they're probably out there putting more mines in the Strait, and they were doing it preemptively, knowing that the U.S. was going to do this today with the whole escort situation through the Strait. So, I mean, that's a death trap going through there. I mean, you could hit a mine. That could be the end of a ship, possibly right there if you hit one. Then you got the sea drone threat. That's a huge threat. Ask Russia about that. That's a massive one. Their navy's gotten decimated by Ukraine, which has no navy, thanks to sea drones. And then on top of that, you got the aerial drones, and you had the fast attack boats. So it's like a triple whammy, quadruple whammy threat in the Strait of Hormuz. So sending ships into there, I mean, that would be quite bold, to say the least. Not saying that the U.S. can't pull it off. There's always a possibility of anything happening, but it's certainly an uphill battle. I would say that's saying the least.
Also, I've seen some people say, and this has been a big argument on the internet, that the little fast attack boats can't lay mines. Here's a picture from H.I. Sutton of an Iranian fast attack boat carrying a Maham 3, which is the heaviest variant of anti-ship mine that they have in their arsenal. So if it can carry a Maham 3, it can carry a Maham 1, a Maham 7, or really any other variant of anti-ship mine that the Iranians have. And there's been dozens of these that went out in the Strait yesterday, clearly all dropping off anti-ship mines, as they can do that, and they might be able to carry a couple of these at a time, maybe two of them at a time, we're not entirely sure. And also a lot of people, here's another thing that I find a little bit funny, people are always like, well, you know, this mine weighs 900 pounds, so clearly this boat isn't able to load that on. I don't know where these people are not seeing this, but a lot of these little fast attack boats can carry like 10 or 12 people at a time. Do y'all know how much 10 or 12 people all weigh together in a group? More than this mine. And if the boats can carry that amount of people on a singular one of these fast attack boats pretty easily, then it can obviously carry one or two of these mines, without a doubt. So I would have to say, they're definitely laying mines. This is the second time we've seen this, and they had to have laid, at this point, with just the amount present yesterday and several days ago, somewhere around 160 mines or more if each of these ships was just carrying one mine apiece. So the minefield just went from 30 mines to somewhere around 210 to 220 mines, and that is a very conservative estimate of how many anti-ship mines are out there right now in that area.
Yeah, definitely.
But a lot of people are also talking about the situation with the drone threat from the coast, and whether it's an acceptable risk for the U.S. Navy to escort ships in the Strait of Hormuz amidst the ongoing drone threat. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so we've been debating this here for a little while now. So what do y'all think about it? Because we've given our assessment. What does the audience think about the risk of the U.S. Navy going into the Strait of Hormuz to escort cargo ships and oil tankers away from the Iranian blockade amid the drone threat? So it looks like people are all over the place. It's almost evenly split, actually. 37% said the threat is manageable from the drones and the Iranian Navy. 36% said no, the drone threat from Iran is simply too dangerous and it's not wise. And 15% said the U.S. will probably clear out those boats by air using some type of, aircraft, U.S. Air Force aircraft, and they'll try to clear out the boats using something like that. So I would say personally, this is not something, if I was the president, I would not be ordering the U.S. Navy to go into the Strait of Hormuz. I would not be doing that because there's simply too many risks. If there was one risk, like let's just say it was only the fast attack boats and that was it, I would say, we can probably risk it. Like send in some aircraft to put some missiles on target if they start going toward the Navy ships, and we'll deal with it. If it gets too hairy, we'll simply pull back out of the Strait. But the catch is, though, we've got at least 3 or 4 major threats all at once. So it's a lot worse. And Iran set it up that way intentionally, I'd imagine. They knew that the risk was going to be too high to send in ships. But right now, the U.S. is trying to make it seem like they're going to send ships in. But right now, we haven't seen it yet. So maybe the U.S. was just bluffing on this, which at this point, I wouldn't be surprised because it's very risky to send them in. But we'll have to see, though, because so far, one ship, cargo ship's already been attacked. It's been hit by an Iranian missile, and the U.S. Navy did not protect that ship. So I don't know where they were at. But they weren't there for that one, apparently. So I'm going to say the threat's too dangerous. I personally wouldn't order something like this. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that the threat is way too high from the drone side because a lot of people don't think of this, like when we start talking about this, but there is no limit to the amount of drones that they could fire. Even FPV drones, like the little ones that the Ukrainians are using in a battlefield like Pokrovsk right now, could be launched to the ship because, crazily enough, it's that close to their coastline that they could do that. So if they have 60 of those little FPV drones, each of them with an RPG-7 warhead, underslung under the drone, and then they have 30 Shaheeds fired, that means that ship is having to deal with 90 incoming threats, and they're all going to hit within minutes. They have to be able to shoot down 90 air defense threats in less than a few minutes Otherwise, they're going to start taking a beating. And some people are going to say, well, it's a warship enforcer. Obviously, they can take a beating because they're made for war. Well, that would be a World War II concept of what a warship is. Modern warships have quite literally no armor on board because they are designed not to get hit. They aren't designed to take hits and keep ticking. If they take a hit, they're out. You can tell that from the Falklands War, or you can tell that from the bombing of the USS Cole, or any other instance where U.S. vessels were hit by any type of explosive. It usually would completely debilitate and knock out the ship instantly with just one explosion, much less several or dozens that are hitting the ship within a minute of each other. So generally, a warship is not built to be able to survive these kinds of threats. And the fact that we haven't done anything to clear out these numbers of threats is something that's a little bit interesting, because many people have gone from saying, when I was saying we need to do clearing actions of, well, that won't even clear out all of the threats needed to get a ship through. Now many people are changing the story to, we don't even need to do air superiority actions over the strait and clear out the threats on the ground. The destroyers can actually just easily deal with these and swat them out of the way like it's nothing. And I can tell you all that, our analysis is never listened to, so it doesn't really matter. But I can tell you that this isn't really going to be going too well in the way that we're trying to do this right now. Literally jumping from step one to the very end. We haven't even done any steps to make this doable, and now we're just skipping to the very end of, okay, let's do escort actions through the strait. This is going to end up atrociously. I can almost tell you all at this point, and I don't like saying this, but with this kind of a mindset, this is going to become a reality. A U.S. warship is going to get hit by something in the strait. It is going to be set on fire. The fire may or may not be controlled, and that crew is going to have to abandon ship basically in hostile waters. Who knows what happens to them once they end up getting captured by the Iranians, because any sort of search and rescue efforts for that many people is probably not going to be that successful in recovering all of them from the water. Not only that, quite literally in the middle of Iran's territorial waters. With that in mind, if we keep a mindset that everything's just so easy, which people keep on making more and more mistakes off of through this war by just making everything sound like it's easy.
Now, I mean, I agree with what his assumption is about the situation. Now you got to take on the thought that we've been having cargo ships coming in and out of the Middle East daily, and I'm talking about trains. I'm not talking about like one or two planes at a time. I'm talking about 6, 7, 8 planes at a time. Going to the Middle East for cargo. And I'm not trying to give nothing away right now, but I think something else is bigger is about to happen. Yes, Strait of Hormuz, they're going to do that, but something else is bigger is about to happen. Before that happens, the ship that tried to jump and just go like that and ended up getting hit. I mean, that was just stupid without actually knowing that the U.S. Navy is already there, for one. But anyways, back to the news, y'all.
Easiest cake, and it's definitely not. We're going to see that our own citizens that are serving this nation in the armed forces are going to pay dearly. They're either going to be captured, they're going to be prisoners of war for an indefinite period of time, who even knows when. They might be tortured, they might be executed, because we're trying to take things and conduct them at such a rash speed and such a reckless mental state that we're putting their lives in danger to achieve something that we could achieve by taking this a little bit more slowly and having the Air Force and the Naval Air Arm go in and try and clear this out to make the situation not peachy for them where there's literally no threats, but at least lower the threat level enough to where it's safe and plausible to send a ship through, instead of doing what we're about to be doing in a couple of hours.
Yeah, well, it looks like initially when these reports came out that the U.S. was allegedly going to start, guiding ships out of the Strait of Hormuz, which many people interpreted that to mean escorts out of the Strait of Hormuz, myself included. It sounded like that's what they were describing. Now there's, some questionability about that, like for all the reasons we've gone over already. Just to give you an idea of what investors are currently thinking, the oil prices fell below $100 a barrel for the crude oil just 2 hours ago. Now the oil price is again rising. It looks like people are starting to realize that maybe it might have been a bluff, and now they're sort of, the fear and the panic setting back in, at least for investors, for the large part. So I'm beginning to wonder if the U.S. was just simply bluffing, or just simply, making a very strangely worded statement, and the idea that maybe people would go for the bait. I'm not really sure what it is at this point, but I mean, we just saw a ship get hit. We just said that a second ago, and the U.S. Navy wasn't there. So I don't know. At this point, I don't know what's going on with the whole thing. It appears to be, if you take all the U.S. officials' words at face value, that they were going to be showing up. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see if Iran attacks another ship. It looks like Iran thought they were showing up because they started attacking ships.
Yeah, I would certainly agree. It doesn't look like it's a good situation at the moment at all, and it's looking rather rough. And I of course see many people in the chat always bringing up, what are we, IRGC propaganda? Well, I'm more so propaganda of trying to keep American soldiers safe. I don't think it's propaganda to say that we should leverage the superior firepower that we have in the Air Force and the Navy's aircraft carriers to be able to clear out the area to make it safe enough for a sailor to face down the clutches of death that they're about to be sailing through. I like to try and empathize with our citizen soldiers and sailors that are in our armed forces, that are the ones that are actually going to be out there and watching burning splinters go flying through the weapons control room in the ship once they get hit by an anti-ship missile or an Iranian drone because they weren't able to deal with them and shoot all of them down. And I try and think about that sailor and what he's going to be thinking of in his final moments, or what he's going to be thinking of when he's abandoning ship in Iranian waters, and go, I would rather like for him to avoid that situation, and I'd rather like for us to actually conduct strategies that protect our sailors and soldiers to make sure that we're not putting them in a situation that requires them to lay down their lives knowingly for the country and needlessly, when we could have avoided that altogether and just come up with a better war plan to be able to make sure that we're not sending people to certain death when they didn't have to be. Sometimes in war, death is a necessity, and sometimes our service members will die, and their sacrifice will be remembered by the nation and the republic for all time, because they continue to make this nation what it is. But I'm not of the idea of telling people to go and get themselves killed in the U.S. Armed Forces needlessly when that isn't necessary, and when we have plenty of other options to make sure that something like that doesn't happen. And I feel like just taking 2 to 3 weeks on this to be able to make sure that we clear it out to make it safe enough for them to pass through was not too much of a big ask. I feel like making sure that it's safe enough for them, instead of just throwing away American lives needlessly, is a much safer option and a far more patriotic option that considers the safety of our people first and foremost in any operations that we undertake.
But all that aside right there, because we don't really know if the ships are going in yet or not. They might not go in at all from the looks of it. But do you think this was maybe some way for the U.S. to try to basically sort of bait Iran into attacking maybe some ships, maybe the U.S. Navy or something like that? So that way they would have some type of, justification for restarting hostilities on Iran potentially. They might have been trying to get Iran to be the first aggressor, so that way they'd have a justification maybe.
Well, in the current situation, that certainly could be the case. They're definitely going to fire upon a U.S. warship. But generally you could just start at military operations now. I mean, we have plenty of justification. They're blocking the freedom of navigation. That is a violation of international law. We don't even need for them to shoot at any of our sailors or any of our ships and put them in harm's way needlessly to either lose a whole Arleigh Burke, which we hardly have the abilities to build them in the United States anymore, and possibly lose dozens of sailors in the process to make a justification. We already have a justification. They're not letting commercial ships through the strait, and because the United States in theory.
Well, not that. I'm not saying to send in a ship and let it get attacked and then use that as a justification. I'm saying simply putting the announcement out that the U.S. was going to intend on going to the strait. Then it would cause, obviously, Iran, which they've already done, to start attacking ships. They might start launching attacks preemptively on the Gulf states. They might launch attacks on the U.S. Navy before any of the U.S. Navy ships go into the strait. And that would then give the U.S. a defensive justification to say, hey, look, look, Congress, look, Senate, we had to start attacking Iran again because it's all defensive. We didn't start it up on our own accord. We simply wanted to start defending our guys. We had to. It was involuntary.
I mean, you could try. You could try and do that, but that depends on the Iranians being goaded into attacking, which we're not guaranteed at the moment. And it looks like while they're making pretty fiery statements, it doesn't really look like that's leaning into directly attacking us or anyone else in the region preemptively, rather than the ships that are passing through. And we've already set the precedent as the United States over the past few weeks in the ceasefire that when they fire upon any ships or seize them, we have absolutely no reaction at all, or even an announcement to make about that action. So it would be pretty hard at this point to make a justification of, we've completely ignored this happening over the past several weeks for over a dozen times, but this time now we're going to use it as a justification. That'd be a hard one to make. The Iranians firing at us would be a much easier one, but that depends on them firing at us. And right now I think that they're largely lying in wait for a U.S. warship to make the mistake of going in the strait with the amount of firepower they have there right now, and then obliterating them, which then basically it's the same result on our end. We have a justification to attack them, but we're also down a warship, and we're also down a good amount of sailors as well that have either been killed or captured in that situation.
Yeah, maybe so. I see some people in the chat saying, though, they're saying, well, it doesn't really seem like Iran wants to break the ceasefire. It seems like Iran wants to keep it the way it is. And I would agree with you. And for the people saying that, I would agree 100%. Every single day that Iran's able to stall with these negotiations, they are able to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed, because that pretty much guarantees that the U.S. isn't taking military action to reopen the strait every single day that Iran keeps stringing U.S. officials along week after week. And every single day the strait stays closed, we are seeing the effects stack up on the global economy. Today we heard that apparently the farmers are having such financial difficulties that they're worried that their farms are all going under, that we might have possibly a famine here in the United States eventually if this doesn't get sorted out quickly. And every single day that this continues, that situation is getting worse. So it's in Iran's interest to put pressure on the West to keep the talks going, to keep stalling, and to also keep the Strait of Hormuz closed as well. So, I think that's what they're doing. That's why they want to keep this thing stalled out like this, because as time goes by, Iran gains more leverage and the U.S. starts losing it, which is something that's fallen on deaf ears right now with the U.S. leadership. They don't appear to see that for the most part, but they better act quick, because otherwise it could be bad for everybody.
Also, on top of that, that's the reason why they'll never be goaded into firing first. Because why? It's like they're in a prime situation right now. The U.S. over 2.5 weeks of a blockade has inflicted about $4.8 billion of economic damage on Iran, which isn't great, but it's manageable. In the meantime, they're sitting here continuing their blockade of the strait, and we're already seeing some pretty significant damage right now in the Western world, and all they have to do is try and sit this thing out and wait. They don't have to actively do anything to us anymore at all. We have to actively do something to them. So, for the larger part, the ball's in our court, not theirs to start attacks, and we either have to start attacking them and clearing out the strait, or they'll just sit back forever in the conditions that they are right now, because they're able to ensure their blockade. It's unchallenged. It has not been challenged. It may never be challenged, and they're able to keep inflicting economic damage the world over and do nothing in the meantime to do it.
Yeah, and also for the people saying it's fear mongering, like here's the report. This came out less than 24 hours ago. It's a report from Forbes, and the headline says 70% of farmers can't afford to grow all their crops. That's what the headline says, and that's not fear mongering. I mean, we've been seeing that the bankruptcies of the farmers have been going through the roof ever since the Strait of Hormuz has been closed, and that is a big problem. These effects, they're going to be compounding. So as time goes by, we'll start to feel them gradually. It's not going to be all at once, where like tomorrow you wake up and the food's gone. It's not going to be like that. It's going to compound, and the further and further it gets deeper into the hole, the worse it's going to be, and the longer it's going to take to pull ourselves back out of the hole. So by the time people start feeling the effects of it, we'll be too far gone at that point. So that's why we keep making a point to say this on the air over and over and over, is because we need to catch it before it gets bad, and the government needs to start dealing with it before it gets horrible, because once it does get horrible, it's going to be that way for quite some time. And the U.S. hasn't experienced a famine. Have we ever experienced a proper famine in the United States? Like even during the Great Depression, was that a proper famine?
It pretty much was, but it wasn't because of, say, like a drought or natural causes, because that's usually what institutes a famine. It was actually because of the financial situation in the United States, that because people couldn't afford the price of food, there was a famine. But it wasn't due to a complete physical lack of food.
Yeah, so I mean, the U.S. hasn't really dealt with a proper famine, like a serious one yet, but we might be sort of barreling toward it right now, and people won't buy it until we're actually feeling it like firsthand. Then nobody buys anything that serious until they actually see it with their own eyes. But I mean, this is literally the trajectory that the U.S. is on right now. This is the trajectory we're on. So unless the U.S. is able to pull a rabbit out of the hat, then we're probably heading toward it, would be my guess.
Yeah, I would have to say, I would certainly believe that it's going to be getting pretty rough, because to tell you a little bit about the only time that we've seen something like this happen nationwide, because I do have to give the caveat, folks, that there were a large amount of small famines that happened throughout the United States for one reason or another, but most of those were within early American history before industrialization and the introduction of a global, or more so a national supply chain, where ebbs and flows in a local area could actually lead to legitimate famines. There was one that actually happened within the area of the Nantahala national forest just west of Asheville back in the 1830s that actually led to one of the first railroads in the United States being built out into this area to be able to stop them from going through another famine and making sure that they had some level of food security that didn't rely on crop yields and good weather just within their local area. But the only time we've ever seen this happen on a national level was during the Great Depression. Before the Great Depression, during the 1920s, a large amount of farms that had been built up under the bonds and loans that were issued by the U.S. government and banks during the First World War to try and increase food production to make sure that they had enough for the war effort started to run on difficult financial times, and were also finding it incredibly difficult to pay back their loans. Because of how the current market situation existed in the 20s, there was really no regulation by the U.S. government as to how many crops could go to market, meaning that everybody that raised their crops and harvested them put all of their crops on the market with absolutely no regulation or more so artificial control of the supply. This means that prices fell through the floor, and most farmers were not able to make any profits on their yields. In fact, year over year, they were losing profits. During that time of the early 1920s, a lot of those farmers started to go bankrupt and defaulted on those loans that the U.S. government and banks had given them to be able to grow out their farms. Then when the financial crash of 1929 happened in the stock market, and then the bank collapses happened afterwards, when the run on the banks began because of the stock market crash, that is when we saw that the situation actually became dire. Because of the already physical lack of food that was existing in the country due to a large amount of farm bankruptcies, and also now due to the financial strain that the country was under, a large amount of people in America could actually not afford the food that was left. And so for that reason, tens of thousands of people in the United States of America would end up starving to death in what is kind of called an artificial famine, because it wasn't one caused by food scarcity, it was caused by monetary scarcity and then the high prices of the food that existed because of the economic conditions. That's why we see now that the U.S. government, through it would be the USDA and a couple of other government bureaus and agencies, pays farmers to destroy crops at the end of harvest season, because they're trying to make sure that they control the supply and therefore the prices, so that way such a similar situation doesn't happen again in the modern age of industrialized agriculture.
Yeah, it's really kind of horrifying if you think about it. Like, I know people, when they hear something that's this, it is scary. I will admit, I'm not going to pretend like it's not horrifying to me as well. It is. But just to address it objectively, it's a bit of a perfect storm that's currently brewing right now. Because think about it. You have the fuel costs rising through the roof. You need fuel to actually distribute the food to the stores for people to be able to purchase it. That's a problem, which means prices are rising. Number two, the actual source of the food, which is the farms, are currently going bankrupt at a record pace. And also, they can't buy enough fertilizer to even fertilize their crops, which is reducing the yields for the farmers that are still in business. So that's a big problem as well. Also, if we want to start importing food, that might be a problem, because of course you have to have ships transporting the food, or possibly aircraft, and that takes fuel, and that cost is rising through the roof. So it's a perfect storm. That's the problem right now. And I'm not really sure if they're going to be able to get this solved before it becomes a big problem. So eventually, we'll have to work through whatever happens. Like, ultimately, it's not doomsday. Like, we'll have to work through whatever it is and simply adapt. But just to let everybody know ahead of time what it looks like, it's not looking super positive right now. So that's why we've been saying that the U.S. should act quickly about this and don't stall, because stalling is going to cost everybody.
I would certainly agree, and that's why action must be taken as quickly as possible in the situation, and must be done effectively, so that we minimize losses, and that we also increase the chances of success and mitigation of the fallout that is already going to be happening. But we're now trying to control the extent of the fallout that is to follow from the actions that have already been made. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best we can at the moment. And we're also going to be giving you a little bit of additional information that's come out from the area over the course of the day. Before the development happened on air of another ship being hit, we were able to see that there was confirmation that on the Strait of Hormuz yesterday, with their larger IRGC fast attack swarms, and we also were able to see additionally that another ship has been seized by the Islamic Republic of Iran today, called the Pilatus Marine. We do understand that this vessel, including the Minoan Falcon, was also seized as well by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and we were able to get a UKMT report on this incident. The UKMTO has received a report of an incident 11 nautical miles west of Surat, Iran. The master of a northbound bulk carrier has reported being attacked by multiple small craft. All crew are reported safe and no environmental impact has been reported. Vessels are advised to transit with caution and report any suspicious activity to the UKMTO while authorities investigate. That was one of the vessels that actually was later seized by the Islamic Republic of Iran and is once again now under their control. The Iranians have also put out a decent amount of statements over the course of the day as well, giving the United States another term of surrender, which laid out the following points. Phase 1, convert the ceasefire into a full end of the war within 30 days across the entire region, including Lebanon. Mutual commitments by Iran, the U.S., Israeli, and Iranian proxies not to attack each other. Iran will gradually reopen the Strait of Hormuz and clear the mines at Blade, accepting U.S. assistance. In return, the U.S. lifts its blockade of Iranian ports. An international body would be established to oversee compliance. Iran revised its demands for reparations in new and sophisticated wording. The proposal also demands withdrawal of forces from Iran's maritime surroundings and an end to major force concentrations in the region. Phase 2 includes the freezing of uranium enrichment for 15 years. After that, Iran resumes enrichment to 3.6%, but commits not to stockpile enriched uranium. Iran rejects the U.S. demand to dismantle nuclear infrastructure or destroy facilities. Already enriched uranium would be transferred to other countries or diluted to civilian levels. Sanctions lifted gradually on a clear timetable, including release of frozen Iranian assets worldwide. Phase 3 would then include Iran in strategic dialogue with Arab and regional states to build a regionalized security framework. So to take all of this out of the more technical wordage of the states right now and to lay this out and what this would physically mean for us here in the United States, this is what it means. We hand over complete control of the Strait of Hormuz to the Iranians. It's pretty much run as their waters from this point on, from north to south and east to west through the entirety of the strait. We would also have to completely give up on asking them anything or stopping their nuclear weapons development and their intercontinental ballistic missile development. They would be able to really do those without any oversight whatsoever, and we would just be having to rely on their good word that they're not trying to create a nuclear weapon, although they already were for years now and are still going to be working on that afterwards. They showed that clearly through the JCPOA. We've also been able to hear that apparently the Iranians would be looking for some form of reparations, but they changed a little bit of wordage on that, meaning that we would actually have to pay them money for them to be satisfied and satiated, even with all of the other concessions that we would have to give them at this point. We also would have to completely withdraw all of our forces from the Middle East and pledge to never building up any significant amount of forces in the region again, basically giving up our sphere of influence and control over our sphere within that area by default. And Iran would then step in and start building its own sphere of influence with all the other Middle Eastern nations after they kicked us out. That is currently Iran's demands, in short, which are absolutely unacceptable in multiple different measures. This is basically demanding for us to surrender and retreat from the Middle East.
Yeah, that's a garbage proposal right there. It's not even worth the paper it was probably written on for the most part. It's really wild. Also, by the way, I find something else interesting. I'm not sure if you got this post right here or not, but I saw today there was footage coming out apparently of a whole bunch of Pakistanis crossing over into Iran to start basically taking petroleum from Iran and distributing that petroleum from Iran back into Pakistan. I'm not sure if you saw that or not.
I actually did. We're going to be getting to that one here in a little bit once we get into the internal Iranian news, because there's that marker and the other one in Tehran, but it was crazy.
Yeah, well, the reason why I bring that up as well is because, this proposal was delivered to Pakistan, and it was then relayed to the United States. The Pakistanis, by the way, they're not really our friends. Like, I know some people think just because they're the mediator, that somehow they're neutral to the United States, or somehow they're friends with the United States. They are not. You gotta be very careful with the Pakistanis. And apparently they're letting this happen, from what we could tell, because Pakistan controls their borders, obviously. It's not as wide open borders in Pakistan. So the fact that apparently vehicles are going across into Iran and then back, and allegedly carrying petroleum products on them, so that way they can get them out of Iran, because Iran's running out of petroleum storage, seems a little bit questionable, to me, to say the least.
I would definitely have to say it is questionable, but we'll show you all that here in a little bit. We also were able to hear that the Iranians have given a 30-day ultimatum to the United States that they must lift the naval blockade, or the options are now an impossible military operation or a bad deal, according to the Iranians. This is also showing us that the Iranians are now putting a deadline on the U.S. blockade, and then we don't really know what they're going to be doing further on than that if we break that deadline. They didn't really specify that clearly. We also were able to see that the Iranians did threaten war once again, and warned that the Strait of Hormuz could become a graveyard for U.S. pirates amid escalating tensions. So it appears that the Iranians are still threatening war as usual. But moving us on out of this news directly within the Strait, we also saw that the Iranians threatened an anchorage today near to the area of Ras Al Khaimah. Ras Al Khaimah's anchorage is right off the coast of Ras Al Khaimah, about 5 miles west. And this is where a large amount of ships are currently still awaiting the ability to try and pass through the strait at some point here in the future. The Iranians broadcast a message today through a direct attack within the area, as we were able to hear the UKMTO advisory stated the following. The UKMTO has received a report from several masters in the vicinity of Ras Al Khaimah that they have been directed by a VHF broadcast to move from their anchorages. Authorities continue to investigate, and vessels are requested to report any further suspicious activity. In the meantime, a lot of vessels decided not to take their chances, and they started to pack up from this large anchorage, and they started to move the hell away from there, heading even deeper into the Persian Gulf to be able to try and escape the eventual attack that the Islamic Republic of Iran may conduct on their vessels as they are sitting there attempting to wait for the moment to pass through the strait. So it does appear that the Iranians are still even further expanding their blockade and are once again using terror for the large part to control the ships within the region and make sure that they're absolutely nowhere close to the strait. This would also require the United States Navy, once it runs the gauntlet, if that's the plan, and it generally looks like that is the plan, through the Strait of Hormuz, to have to travel all the way to these ships, which may be sitting somewhere within the middle of the UAE and Qatar, to then be able to organize them into a convoy and then bring them towards the Strait of Hormuz, which increases the amount of time per transit for a U.S. naval vessel and a convoy, and it also buys the Iranians a little bit more time to get their defenses ready each go-around for these vessels to try and pass through the strait and for them to be able to have their chance to fire upon them with a decent amount of successive landings and hits. We've also been able to hear that near to the area of the Gulf of Oman, CENTCOM also announced that they have been able to turn around 49 Iranian vessels from their blockade over the course of its entirety, once again showing that the U.S. Navy is still enforcing the U.S. blockade within the Gulf of Oman. That is the entirety of the situation as we've seen it over the day inside the Strait of Hormuz, what's happening now and what may be following within the next several days. We've also been able to see that along the Iranian-Pakistani border, there's been a little bit of a situation. This is one that Matthew was actually talking about just a moment ago. Here we can see an endless amount of pickups, and they're all apparently carrying some sort of fuel or gas to the Pakistani border for these individuals to sell off, and then apparently make some money, and for the Pakistanis to be able to get some oil or some fuel of some sort. Don't really know how this is working, but this is the footage that came out today, showing an endless stream of these pickup trucks waiting at the Pakistani border to be able to try and shift over just a couple of gallons, maybe just a barrel each, of oil from each of these trucks.
Pause the video, just show a snippet of the video.
Oh, we've already shown that snippet, I suppose, then. But moving us on out of that development along the Pakistani border, we also were able to hear from the Iranian government that they claimed that the United Arab Emirates fighter jets took part in the prior airstrikes against Iran during the armed phase of the conflict, meaning that the Iranians are stating that the UAE is an active belligerent in the war, and if the war begins, this is supposed to clearly indicate they're considering the UAE to be a part of further military actions, and they'll be trying to go out of their way to strike them in the future. We've also been able to hear that U.S. aircraft were on the move today over Iraq, and we were able to note that a U.S. State Department CN-235 was operating a State 34 over the area, and appears they've been heading to the Sulaymaniyah airport in northern Iraq, most likely to speak to the Kurdish authorities within that area, maybe even about the guns and where they ended up going after we gave them to them. We've also heard within southern Lebanon that the Israelis are continuing their military operations against Hezbollah, and we were able to see some artillery operations today by the Israelis against Hezbollah forces within this area. We also were able to additionally hear that apparently the Israelis blew up some sort of a boat restaurant on the coastline, which we can see right here. Apparently they say that it was affiliated with some Hezbollah activities, so they took a bomb straight to the restaurant and blew the boat restaurant to pieces. That is the restaurant right there, by the way, just in case y'all are wondering. What did it look like? Well, that's what it looked like, but it no longer exists because of the 2,000-pound bomb that was planted right inside of it. Moving us on out of that news, the Israelis also appear to be indicating that they're pretty ready for war. That's not really a shock. The Israelis are always cruising around for a bruising in a sense.
You're always bruising around for a cruising. I've never put it that way.
Man and fish can coexist peacefully, but according to a statement by senior Iranian officials to News 14, a return to fighting in Iran is dictated by reality. This is not a question of if, but when. So that was a statement by Israeli authorities today, once again showing that they're once again just raring to go for the continuation of the conflict. We also saw that major U.S. airlifts were still ongoing throughout the day, indicating that military actions will eventually be happening within the region at some point. But that's generally all of our news that we have from the Middle East, and that's actually going to be returning us on back up into Europe and all of the major news and developments that we got out of that area over the course of this day. But before we move on into that, I do have to say, folks, that we've been live on air for an hour and 40 minutes already at this point, and we've already covered the major news of the drone attacks that were happening in Moscow and in the St. Petersburg area, and we've also covered the entirety of the news within the Middle East so far. We're about to be moving on back into Europe and a little bit of periphery news elsewhere around the world to be able to cover those major developments that are happening elsewhere. But before we get on into the rest of this all, I do want to make sure that we round out one last poll that's been asked of all of y'all on the situation in the Middle East, as it does appear that a lot of, that one piece of footage today showed hundreds of trucks that appear to be trying to transport some sort of oil into Pakistan. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, and what do you think about that as well?
Okay, so nobody's really sure the exact reason why these trucks are going to Iran, but, it's pretty clear that something's up. I mean, why is everybody trying to go into a war-torn country where a war is about to break out? It seems a little bit strange. So the footage appears to show Iran exporting oil to Pakistan via pickup trucks. So what should happen? 36% said the U.S. should threaten military action, while another 36% said the U.S. should just ignore it, and 17% said the U.S. should diplomatically protest. So it's not worth military action. I will say that's not really worth it because, pickup trucks, even if they are exporting oil and it turns out to be true, the speculation about that, it's not enough to really fool with because, pickup trucks really can't transport that much right there. And the problem is Iran's run out of oil storage. So that's probably why they're trying to get it out of their country is because of that. So I think that the U.S. should probably just diplomatically protest. Since Pakistan wants to pretend like they're our friends, then go to them and say, hey, look, if you're really such our friend, then what's going on here at your border? And confront them about it and see what they say. Just simply do that and leave it at that pretty much. It's just not worth the trouble. But enforce it, what say you?
I would say that we should diplomatically protest, but I would say that it's not really that big of a deal. I mean, it's not like it's millions of barrels a day going into Pakistan. It's probably a few thousand in reality, and that's really nothing to even make that big of an issue over. And on top of that, it doesn't look like it's sanctioned by the Iranian government or the Pakistani government. It looks like this might be taken upon by the people themselves on both sides, and some corrupt border officials are probably allowing this to happen. So turning this into a giant overblown deal where we start threatening military action against a nuclear-armed Pakistan would be really jumping the gun on the situation that doesn't even require that and won't be changing the broader situation at all with our current position against the Iranians. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But with that in mind, I do have to once again get back to what I was talking about, which is the link to the stream and how many people have been here. Because we've had a peak viewership tonight of 19.3 thousand people here on the stream over the course of the past hour and 40 minutes. And we've also seen that 135,000 people have watched this show over that amount of time. I'm going to thank you all greatly for really enjoying our breaking news streams that we run every single day. And I hope that this one has once again been out to enforce respect. I'm trying to make sure to tone down the more so the emotion and just get more into the technicality tonight because it is a breaking news live stream. And I hope that a lot of people have been enjoying the more in-depth looks or the more intricate details of the kind of military operations involved in the analysis and also the news as well, as we try our best to make sure that we provide the most well-researched news and also the most up-to-date news and accurate news that we possibly can here on this channel. But before we move on into the rest of our news for the night, I do want to make sure that we take a brief pause for a moment and address 3 questions from the chat to get to talk to a few of y'all before we get on into the rest of all the news for the night. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so our first super chat to address goes to Friar Robert, and thank you very much, Friar, for that $201 support, by the way, a massive support. We do appreciate it very much. It's that support right there that keeps our channel running, and we're almost entirely crowdfunded by viewers, so we do appreciate that. And Friar said 2 items. He said, my daughter turned me onto your site, and when I told her I liked you guys, she responded, I don't listen to fake news. I was there. Track record speaks for itself. 4 years running plus. But anyways, number 2, he said, what's up with the microwave guns? They're supposed to shoot down drones.
And I think actually, Matthew, his daughter is the one who turned him on to the show. So I think she's saying that she doesn't like fake news and we're not. I think that's what that meant.
Oh, okay. I was determined that mean that the daughter was like saying, I don't listen to those fake news bastards. I was thinking, damn. I was thinking like something about this that makes sense. I'm like, why don't you recommend the show and then say it's fake news? That makes more sense.
Yeah, I was literally, why would you turn them onto the channel and then say we're fake news? I was like, that would make a lot of sense. But huge thanks to you once again for that incredible support, Friar Robert. And I gotta say, that's great to hear that we get shared around in between families. There's actually a lot of families who watch the show, like entire families, the daughters and the sons and the moms and the dads and distant relatives that get together sometimes to watch the show. And I always think that's really cool to hear that it sometimes becomes an entire family deal to listen to the Enforcer News show, because it's so cool to think about that, folks. Like, to think that a lot of people gather around and apparently have some family time while watching the show. I always think that's a great thing. And it's wonderful to hear that your daughter recommended this channel to you, and I hope that you've been enjoying it greatly. It sounds like you certainly have. And I hope that she's continuing to enjoy it as well, because we always try and make sure to put out the best news, the most up-to-date news, accurate, and as well analyzed as it can be. Because it means a lot to us to know that loads of people look towards this channel to be a reliable beacon, basically a lighthouse in the storm of bad news, or fake news more so, that comes out from around the world, the news that leans either always to the hard left or always to the hard right, or they just live in conspiracy conspiracy theory land, where the truth is mired in a whole bunch of false realities that completely muddy up the kind of atmosphere conditions that news is actually happening and developing in. And we're always happy to know that we can be one of the folks out there on YouTube that are able to clear out that sort of a news space and try and keep it a lot more accurate and sticking to the facts. And I gotta thank you massively for humongously supporting the channel tonight, and helping this channel keep running, because it is viewer support itself that helps us to be able to keep these breaking news streams running, to keep our short videos going, and to keep our regular, normal scheduled stream shows running as well. Sadly, tonight, folks, we won't be able to run one because this one went live early, and also is going to be running into that stream time without a doubt, so we won't be able to get to that one. But I do thank you incredibly once again. And as far as the microwave guns, those are actually, from what we can tell, they're actually a little bit of an obsolete concept these days. The idea back then was that some form of a microwave, or really more so of an electronic pulse, would be able to knock out a drone, at least in a limited burst, and be able to render them mute. But we don't really see a lot of those being used these days, because they actually turned out to be somewhat ineffective. We started to see that a lot of the drone guns were not able to put out a strong enough burst of the right kind of a frequency, or at a great enough distance, to be able to knock out the more so drones that were coming in and attempting to hit the enemy forces like the Russian Federation. So for that reason, we started to see that drone warfare and countermeasures started to evolve to stationary objects that were able to emit much stronger signals, or electronic warfare signals, over a broader area over an indefinite period of time. And those have proven to be somewhat effective to some degree, but even still, sometimes those are not entirely effective either. The most effective form of drone defense that we see these days in the war in Ukraine is, in the technical terms, called kinetic drone defenses, which it sounds really neat and really advanced, but what that really means in proper English is putting a gun to a drone and blasting it out of the sky. That's basically what kinetic drone defense is, and that has crazily enough proven to be the most reliable form of drone defense possible. It can't get through an electronic, well, I mean, a drone might be able to get through an electronic warfare system, can't get through a bullet. So that's been the real running logic these days in Ukraine, is that it might be able to get through an electronic warfare system, it might be fiber optic, it might just be lucky, but sure as hell ain't getting through that slug that we're going to fire at it from 12 gauge, and it seems to have been quite effective. They're working nowadays on laser-based defense systems around most of the world, but the problem with those is that while a lot of people put a lot of hope and faith in them, and I'm certainly one of those people, it's hope and faith that is put forward too much too quickly. The systems just aren't fieldable yet, and they haven't been produced in large enough numbers to become the evolution in that quote-unquote kinetic drone defense sphere of just directly shooting them down. So while they do exist, they're just not in large enough numbers, meaning that the microwave guns, as you called them of old, have long since disappeared for the most part, and we've seen that they've been replaced by just standard shotguns and machine guns for the larger part.
I hate to break it, but actually that's not the case. The high-powered microwave weapons, they're still in development to a large degree. There's pretty much every major defense company here in the United States is developing their own version of it for the most part. But no, they're still working on it. It still is an actual concept that they're working on, so it's definitely not going by the wayside. It's just still a work in progress since 2018.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about the ones that you saw on Ukraine and Russia side that's been pretty much completely phased out at this point, except for the Russian air defenses in Moscow, which still move this thing around in public from time to time. But the Ukrainians never use them. We never even see any Russian frontline units that are issued these or use them, and haven't for years now.
Yeah, but like high-powered microwave weapons, though, to deal with drones, that's still a technology. Like, they may not be using it like with the frontline soldiers, but it's still a technology that's still being explored to defend against drones to a large degree. So the technology itself's not obsolete; it's still a thing.
Well, I guess that wasn't a good wordage, because considering that it's been phased out of use pretty much in Ukraine, that would generally suggest, at least normally, that it's obsolete or it just doesn't work. That's really what I was trying to say. Because if you roll out a tank and the tank is so lightly armed it gets blown away, and it gets blown away so often they stop using it, generally we would say that kind of weapon system is now obsolete, at least in its current form. And while it might come back later in an evolution, it's generally not usable now, and therefore would be deemed obsolete. So that's more so
the high-powered microwave weapons, the premise that they work on is basically directed energy, which is what microwaves are that most people know about, but it fires an EMP pulse to disable the electronics in the drone. So even if it's a fiber optic controlled drone, it can still be affected by the high-powered microwaves, even if it is a fiber optic. So that's why they're still working on it, because the main reason why people start switching to physical interceptors mainly is because it's cheap and it's a lot easier to develop than something as advanced as a HPM weapon that they were talking about.
Interesting. I actually didn't know that one. All I knew is that the original drone guns, which I thought he was talking about, they were the microwave guns, were the ones that he was asking about, and those generally, in their iterations that we saw back in the early part of the war, are obsolete because they're completely unusable in modern war space, and we haven't seen them used for years. But a big thanks to you so much once again for that unbelievably massive support and help this channel to keep it running, because it is folks like you and your support that helps make this thing possible, because we run every and sponsor-free shows every single day of the week, 6 days a week, and it's only viewer support that helps this entire channel to keep on rolling every day. And I got to thank you so much once again for that, because you're helping us to stay on air and be able to talk about the interesting news going on around the world. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to none other than Nick Hines. And thank you very much, Nick, for that $50 support, and we'd appreciate that very, very much. And Nick said, it must be going down if you guys are starting this early.
Oh, yeah, pretty much. I mean, the major drone attack in Moscow, the announcement of attempting to break the Iranian blockade in the next few hours, it actually is going down quite a lot. And I got to thank you massively for the support, so we could be on air and cover this news as it is going down, because folks like you supporting this channel give us the ability to be able to cover this news each and every day, and to cover breaking news streams like these, to where major events are happening that rarely ever happen in the modern day, if at all, in the news that we cover. So humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we were on to the last question of the segment, and we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news for the night.
All right, and this one goes to Trister1, who put in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Trister, for that $50 support right there. He did not leave a comment, though, and I think he already left for the night. But we do appreciate it from a longtime channel legend, Trister. And we do, once again, appreciate that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you massively for the support, Trister, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, it wouldn't be able to keep running, and we wouldn't be able to be here right now. I hope you're having a great night if you're not here right now at the moment. If you were still here, I hope you've been enjoying the show, because while you didn't throw in a comment, the support says a load without any words, and helps us to be able to say thousands of words, and keep running the show every single day. So a huge thanks to you so much for that.
I think he had to go back to the hospital.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate to hear. I hope he's
a doctor.
Oh, well, that's better to hear. So I hope
so, man, he just went through all the emotions. He was like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Oh, he's a doctor. Oh, okay. That was a roller coaster, kind of like the Strait of Hormuz.
Man, real. But beyond that, man, thank you once again for support, Tristan. I hope you have a fun time at the hospital then. And with that, it's time for us to move on from that whole brain twister right there, because the way Matthew said that, I thought he was dying. Like, Matthew's one of those doctors who comes out and goes, it's like, tell me, doc, is he going to make it? Well, he looks like he's dead. Oh, no, I mean, he just looks like he's dead. He's fine, but he doesn't look that great physically. It's like, man, it's like, all right, great way to figure it out. Man, that was
honestly hilarious. That was comedy gold right there. Totally unintentional, too.
Man, you said he went to the hospital. I went, aw. But he's a doctor. I went, yay! That's why I like the discourse. Goodness. But anyways, a huge thanks to you once again. With that, it is time for us to move on into the rest of the news for the night. Moving us on and over into the People's Republic of China, we have seen that the U.S. Secret Service is still preparing everything for the arrival of the President of the United States, which will be happening between May 14th and 15th, as several C-17 Globemasters have been flying in and out of Beijing on a somewhat regular basis to be able to get everything in place for the arrival of the President in the People's Republic of China. Just to give you all some updates on that. We've also been able to hear within the United States of America a couple of interesting developments as well. For one, the Pizza Index is indicating a heightened level of activity, which is showing us that right now the Pentagon is still working those midnight oil hours and trying to get everything together for what's going to be happening next, whatever that may be in reality. We've also been able to hear additionally, I don't know why that's a marker, let me get rid of that one, just popped up out of the blue. But we also were able to hear that here within the United States of America, according to Forbes, 70% of farmers can't afford to grow all of their crops. And to give you a little bit of an understanding of the situation right now, due to the cost of fertilizer and a couple of other agricultural resources that are required for a successful harvest here in the United States these days, farmers are finding it impossible to be able to afford the increased prices. Farmers that are not major corporations generally see that their margins are fairly slim. You're never going to become a multimillionaire being a farmer. But it is incredibly important work. It feeds the nation and it makes sure that our food security is stable. However, with the rising cost of fertilizer, a lot of farmers are being eked out from being able to fertilize their fields and produce their 100% maximum yields because they cannot afford the rising cost of fertilizer. This also means that we're going to be seeing decreased crop yields this year at a minimum as a result of this, and we may also see that if the prices continue to increase, that farmers generally may start going under at far higher rates. We already know that according to financial reports that have been made recently, bankruptcies for farmers in the United States of America have increased by 40% across the nation and have increased 70% within the U.S. Midwest, which is the highest rate that we've seen so far in the increases that have happened over about the past 2 months. So it is giving us an understanding that the strain is already hitting farmers at this moment right now, and unlike some people in the chat who say that everything's fine and everything's well, farmers are not doing that well as a result of this. If you doubt that, you can go ask all the people over at Spirit Airlines if they're doing well, and with the rising oil prices, a different market, and generally they're saying that they're not doing too well. Case in point, their company shut down just yesterday, so, you know.
Man, it's killing me how many people are totally ignoring the letter that Spirit Airlines put out before they went under about how they were blaming the jet fuel price rise for the reason why they went under. People are completely ignoring that. Like, it's wild. Like, I've seen it, like, nonstop all over Twitter today. People saying, oh, it's this person's fault or it's that person's fault. It's like, I mean, there's even an organization out there that's involved with airlines that's saying that, oh, it's this person's fault. It's like, are y'all ignoring the airline's own letter that they put out? It's like the people that literally know their own books, they know their finances, are the ones saying that it's the jet fuel cost that sunk them, but yet they're acting like it's not the case.
Well, I mean, obviously, Matthew, all these stupid idiots that ran this company clearly don't know what sunk their company. I mean, that'd be like asking us, Matthew, one day if the YouTube channel goes under, why it went under. Clearly, we wouldn't know. Because we only run the company. We're only involved in its intricate, intimate details to know why. Clearly, some other guy in the U.S. government who doesn't want to make it sound like, he led to the collapse of a company would know the answers, although he wasn't involved in the operations of the company whatsoever, to be able to know what actually led to it to fall apart. And also, just to beat this one at the head, people are saying, because this is the alternative, well, it was actually the failure of allowing the JetBlue Spirit merger a couple of years back that actually led to Spirit collapsing. That's not the case. That merger cannot be allowed, and I went and looked into that after the show last night, because it would have produced a company that would have created a monopoly within that sphere, which is the budget airline industry. That would have created a monopoly. The Surface Transportation Board and the U.S. government cannot make actions and approve mergers that create monopolies within an industrial market or an industrial category. That is completely out of the question. The government, by law, cannot do that. So blaming the government for saying, damn them for following the law and not allowing a monopoly to be formed by that merger is a pretty goofy argument, because because generally, as a running trend here in the United States, we're generally against the government sponsoring, encouraging, and forming monopolies, or monopolies forming naturally on their own. So, pretty hard to make the claim, well, if we only allowed for a monopoly to happen, the U.S. government to completely just overlook the antitrust laws that we have to follow, then this whole thing would have been fine. It's like, well, technically we can merge every single company in the United States into one corporate conglomerate and just call it America Incorporated, and nobody would ever go under at that point because it'd just be one super company. But that generally seems to be a little bit of an un-American principle, to be able to form the entire nation's industrial sector and the commercial sector into one business to just try and avoid any sort of financial collapses.
Yeah. Well, it's a crazy thing. It's like they were called Spirit when they were in business. It's like, now they're out of business. What are they going to rebrand to now? Ghost? What are they going to call it now? They're going to call it Phantom? It's like, also, by the way, it's like, who's going to buy all those assets? They had a lot of planes. They had a lot of everything. They have gates at airports. And unfortunately, a whole bunch of employees got laid off, too, obviously, when they went under, which is a shame. But somebody's eventually going to buy it. I heard a YouTuber out there is apparently going to try to buy the airline and turn it into a community airline.
Really?
Yeah, it's just a rumor, though. I'm not sure if it's true, but yeah, somebody's eventually going to buy it. They got a lot of aircraft that's now available for sale, I imagine.
Wait, you're saying, Matthew, that because the company shut down, all these aircraft are just empty and vacant?
Yeah, that's usually what happens.
Oh, I know a name for it. Spirit Halloween.
Spirit Halloween, like a pop-up shop?
Yes, we run horror-related pop-up shops inside the Spirit aircraft. The branding is almost completely done already. Spirit and Spirit Halloween have very similar names. We just had to paint a little Halloween below Spirit. And there you have it. You got a Spirit Halloween right there.
Yeah, possibly. I heard rumors, too, that the U.S. government was thinking about buying the assets of Spirit and somehow turning it into, like, a state, like, sponsored airline or something, which is a little bit odd because, in a capitalist society, you don't really have, like, state-run companies like that. It's usually not a thing. That's usually something you see in, like, the USSR or something like that. Not really America. But they were rumored, or at least chatting about it. I'm not sure if it was maybe just a whole bunch of chatter to ignore for the most part. Probably is. But that would be a fascinating concept.
That would be a fascinating concept. We'll have to see what they do with it. I have a feeling that this project going to end up being the legacy airlines because everyone always has fanciful ideas. They'll probably just be the legacy airlines that buy up all the A320s. Because, let me think here, what company would probably do that? It might actually be JetBlue that just buys up whatever's left for the most part. And
I doubt it.
Why not?
I'm not sure they got the money on hand to go buy that stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I forgot the whole financial calamity thing going on in that industry. Oh yeah, I forgot. That's
I think all of them, not one particular airline. I think they're all kind of hurting to a large degree because, when the prices really start rising, their margins start shrinking, and their margins during peacetime is already pretty rough because, the airline business is tough. It's as tough as what I've heard is the restaurant business, that type of tough. Very slim margins. One thing goes wrong and you could be going under in a week.
Yeah, that's what happened back in the day to Pan Am and TWA and all of the others, Northwest and everything, back in the time of the 1970s oil crisis. That pretty much guaranteed that all of them were going to be folding within the next 10 to 15 years after that.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see who gets it, but right now it's not really clear.
Yeah, that's true. We also were able to hear, by the way, folks, another little news before we go out Washington, that according to the U.S. Attorney General Todd Blanche, he stated the United States is engaged in a military operation in Iran, not a war. This came a day after the President of the United States issued a letter to Congress announcing the official cessation of hostilities with the Islamic Republic of Iran. So I have a feeling that the Department of Justice and the Office of the President really aren't on the same page as whether the war is on or whether it's off, because we're hearing everything in between. Moving us on out of that, it's now time for us to finally get on back into Europe and all the major news that's come out of here over the course of the day. Moving us on into Europe, we were able to hear that Germany has announced through Friedrich Merz's Twitter that the United States is and will remain Germany's most important partner in the North Atlantic Alliance. We share a common goal. Iran must not be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons. So it is showing.
He's trying to walk back his statements a little bit. It looks like he might be feeling the pressure from the U.S. actually.
Maybe so. So it does look like the Germans are taking a little step back and backtracking some of the prior statements that they've made. We've also been able to hear that Sweden did seize an oil tanker today called the Jinhui in the Baltic Sea as part of a growing crackdown on Russia's sanctions and shadow fleet. The ship, sailing under a Syrian flag, was boarded near Trelleborg. Authorities suspect it's involved in sanctions evasion using fake or irregular flag registration and also flagged safety and seaworthiness problems. It was reportedly not carrying cargo, and its route and destination raised questions by Swedish authorities. Outside of that news, we also were able to hear of other major developments within the Russian Federation, which we're going to be getting into right now. Moving us on into the city of Perm, we were able to confirm that the damage to the oil tanks within the southern area of the refinery have been quite significant, as video footage, picture evidence more so came out today, showing the fire and the damage that's been caused to the southern area of the facility, and the area in red is the part that has been destroyed, so most of the major oil tanks within that area are completely gone. Moving us on to that news in Perm, and that fire that finally appears to be dying down, we also were able to hear that just west of Ufa, within the small Russian city of Shishmy, in Bashkortostan, it does appear that they got cooked today by a Ukrainian drone attack.
Carbon, perhaps?
I tell you. Maybe even finely grilled. Take a look at this. Oh, probably yet.
They're whipping out the fine Russia for this one.
Man, they really are whipping out that fine Russia. Before long, man, they're going to be calling that fine China because it's going to be a part of the People's Republic of China.
I knew that was coming. I literally set that one up for you. You walked it clean.
Man, you set me up for that slam dunk right there. I tell you. That's not close to the Ukrainian border. We also can see that the Ukrainian drones just keep ticking, even after taking a licking. This drone right here was hit by a Russian interceptor, but interestingly enough, it had taken a humongous amount of shrapnel damage even before this from multiple other drones that tried to take it down, and it was still going. It's like the Second World War out here with the amount of shrapnel holes that's in this thing, and it's still going. We don't know if it made it to its target or not, but it certainly looked like it had a decent chance of doing it. We also got to see that Fortnite came under significant attack today as well, while Moscow was also under attack, which we saw in several clips, including that one showing a fire. We also were able to see some clips here showing us that whole scene.
Oh, that's a mouse right there. You got ringtones going off in the background. It's chaos.
Man, legitimate chaos. Unmitigated chaos. And we also got this clip as well. This one also from Vornish. We can hear the dogs yapping in the background as they listen to the noises. We can see a little bit of air defense fire there. Oh!
Oh, wow. This rescue was awfully silent while that was happening. Usually they're freaking out and screaming.
Man, honestly, usually they are, but he kept the composure. He kept it well. We also got to see some other clips. Oh, actually, that was more so the report on the massive drone attack. We also got to see air defenses active over Belgrade today. You can see the streaks of the S-300 air defense systems that might be in the area, trying to shoot down the incoming drones. We don't know if they were successful or not, but it did confirm that there was air defense activity over Belgrade today. Moving us on out of all of this footage within the central area of the western part of the Russian Federation, we have to go down and into the area of Novorossiysk. Ukrainian drone attacks last night started to hit some different targets. Russian shadow tankers that were attempting to load up with a little bit of oil that they can load in Novorossiysk. They started blowing these up before they could even make it to the port. Easy pickings is what they call them.
Man, are we looking at Russia or are we looking at Iran?
We're definitely looking at Russia. You know how we know?
How?
Because in the background I can hear,
The long-range sanctions are increasing every day. They need to walk away while they have the chance.
We have the see bye drone. We're going to send out a see bye, go see what's happening in that strait. Oh, look at that. Oh, man, we get the last moments of it, but man, this thing was lurking back here. It's just lurking, went in for the engine room.
and it just took a moment to really line up and say, oh, there's the engine room, and then went right for it. Really something. Moving us on out of all of these clips, we also got to see within the occupied territories of Ukraine, the Ukrainian armed forces were striking targets within Luhansk. We were able to see FP2s making their way into the city of Luhansk in this clip. And there's the hit. Oh, took him out, yeah.
Tough day, tough break.
And then we got another clip of it as well. So if you didn't enjoy the first one, you certainly will enjoy the second.
What a gremlin.
It's coming in, he's coming here to say, yeah.
Своим, блядь, медом нахуй намазанный или чё,
Yeah.
блядь? Пидорасы, блядь.
You know, I just realized something. The little telegram logo down there in the left corner looks like a drone coming in.
Начал работать.
You know, it kind of does, actually.
Пиздец, что происходит в этом мире? Сука, опять нахуй пролетел мимо нахуй носатый.
And here it comes again. But moving us on from that clip and on into our next one, we also were able to see right here. There you get the blast out of the whole thing. That's nice. That's one
Pun intended.
Oh? Oh! Oh, well, we just got blinded by the light. And then they turned it back off. And look at that! A little fire in Luhansk. Well, moving us on out of that, and on into the area of Alchevsk, we also were able to see some strikes in Alchevsk. Oh, твою мать, блядь.
They've already got the generators running.
Man, they know it. They know when it's coming. Those generators get cooking. But moving us on out of all of that, we need to make sure to go and get y'all an important analysis over the course of this D. And it's an important one that was provided by Miss Disa, keeper of the records. We've been able to see that over the course of this day, no Bobcat skid steers were lost, bleed.
Damn, that's a damn shame right there.
It's a tragedy, really. But we were able to hear that over the course of this day, over the course of the entirety of the day, that Russian losses from May 3rd on day 1,530 are as follows. 76 artillery systems ties as the 15th highest loss, 2,224 drones is tied for the 13th highest, new category, 12 plus ground robotic vehicles or ground robotic complexes added to the cumulative 1,294, that's an entirely new category by the way, and 282 auto and fuel tanks is the 5th highest loss. Over the course of the day, we've been able to hear that 1,080 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed, along with 2 main battle tanks, 3 APCs, 76 artillery pieces, 2 MLRSs, 2,224 drones, 12 ground robotic complexes, which are ground-based drones, and 282 supply trucks and fuel trucks. It was a pretty decent day, and one thing that's very interesting to know is that we have an entirely new category of losses. The ground robotic complex. These are the little tractor-wheeled ground-based drones that we've seen that both sides have started to use in greater degrees, and apparently I'm guessing that the Ukrainians took these losses and created an entirely different category out of them, out of the operational tactical UAV category. We're not entirely sure how that works in particular, or where they got the number of 1,306 to work off of beforehand, but I'm guessing that it must have been from the operational tactical UAVs, and they now decide to divide the category into air-based drones and ground-based drones, instead of totaling them all into one large group, which doesn't really describe exactly what type of drone, which there's huge differences, of course, are being hit and destroyed. But moving us on out of that bit of news and that casualty report, which is adding an entirely new loss factor into the equation, we also were able to see that down in the front of Konstantinivka, the Ukrainians were continuing to strike and destroy Russian forces, in the 36th Marine Brigade, that is. Let us take a look. Oh, there went an anti-tank mine into that house. And there goes the house. You know, that thing...
What was that house? Why did it have, like, prison bars in the front of it?
You see, Manty, this is where they put the haters of the Enforcer channel, you see. They put them in a breeze. like with the bars on the windows.
Man, that house was, like, literally made like a shed you'd find at the hardware store, though the way it had those metal rods, like, going through it.
Well, Matthew, that's how they build them. That's how they build them in Eastern Europe. We can also see this tank right here getting chased down. A little woolly looking.
A woolly mammoth. Look, oh.
Opa.
Oh, dear. We have a little, oh, I thought we had a replay, but, oh,
look, some Russians on dirt bike. They're having so much outdoor fun, and now they are not. Then they got a ladder, and then they got the excavator, and then they got another Russian soldier, and then they got an APC, and then they got a Bulhaka. Or a lot of
dang, man, they had that thing, like, packed full of dudes. I didn't know that thing had that kind of weight capacity on it.
And they got a Bulhaka, and you're honestly, man, like, the way they load some of these vehicles down, I feel like the suspension's destroyed by the time they get somewhere on them.
Yeah, and then Ukrainians really destroy the suspension when they get them hit it.
Yeah, I tell you, man, that they be hitting this thing like that fella in that Michael Jackson movie. I forgot what his name is. We see them here dropping more anti-tank mines.
Jesus, dropping entire anti-tank mines on the spot. Oh, look, they got some losses for sure. They got the stat report after this video.
let's see here. This is enemy soldiers 55, position 63, drones, which is Bila for some reason, 79, Burohana Technica, which are APCs, these are 3, Motor Technica, which are like little ATVs, that's what it means in Ukrainian, that's 11, and then they have automobiles, which are also Automobilna Technica, 65 of them, then they got 33 communication systems, 10, let's see, these are Bognevi Savsovi, I believe is what the hell is pronounced, it's 10 tanks, and then they also got 1, I don't know what that is. It's logistics for, it says logistica. Okay, so that's 1 logistics post. In total, they've gotten quite a lot of logistics positions and pieces of equipment, 191 of them actually. So the 36th Brigade of the Marines is doing quite well on that front. We also were able to additionally see within the area of Pokrovsk that Russian forces were also apparently sending out the crippled. The 153rd Mechanized Marine, or the Naval Infantry of the Russian Federation, which you can see right there, are currently sending out cripples to the front. They're literally having to use crutches to try and advance on the Ukrainian position. I'm not going to show you the whole clip. Yeah, it is awful. I'm not going to show you the whole clip on this one because the Ukrainians did wipe the guy out.